was 1, and I had Tony at 1. So anyway, he said he can do another day. I'm like, okay. So Bowler last minute said he could do it. I don't think he can hear me. Whatever. Do you hear me do you hear me right now? Okay. Okay. Now you can just hear me, right? Okay. Cool. Yeah, so Tony, we're gonna have to move to another day. I thought I thought old chick had committed to 11:30, but it was 1, and then anyway, mix up there. But Bowler can do 11:30. And then I got the number for the Wizards, for the Athletics Wizards writer, trying for Wednesday with him. Oh yeah. And then let's see. Oh, the Apple TV guy who's also with the 49ers, Carlos Mauricio Ramirez, he committed for 11:30 on Wednesday. So yeah, and I got his actual phone number. He's not just calling in, so we'll ask if he's cool to we talk with him during football season too. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. All right. Let's do this. Number 2 pick, man. Let's go. Number 2, baby. I am strongly against them trying to trade up to 1. Okay, we'll talk about that. Are you we'll talk about it. You're are you like do what you can to get AJ? I'm do what you can to get whoever you think is the okay. Best player in this draft. Like, yeah. And to me that seems like they're going to try to do that for AJ. Yeah, just don't yeah. Just don't give up assets you don't need to when you can get a star at 2 anyway is my opinion, but Ryan Smith might just do that. Let's do it. Oh, you're my I have my idea for how you can get back at your neighbor too if you want to talk about that. Yeah, we'll get to that at some point.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to the Sean O'Connell Show. Happy to have you with us on a very momentous and interesting day. Well, coming off of, I should say, a very momentous and interesting day in the history of our state. Our show today and every day is brought to you by our friends over at Big Willie's 1717 South Main. Head down there to watch any sporting event that's happening, NHL playoffs, NBA playoffs, college softball. Man, they've got a bunch of cool NBA games and Major League Baseball games going on right now. If you were looking for a place to feed your lovely mother on Mother's Day, Big Willie's was running specials for that, drink and food specials. They take care of the community. They'll take care of you. Tell them OC sent you when you go to 1717 South Maine. Hopefully all the mothers out there had a great Mother's Day. Hopefully all of you who were trying to make sure that the mothers in your life felt special, hopefully you achieved that goal. And happy Mother's Day to anyone who was a Utah Jazz fan, is a Utah Jazz fan, has ever thought about being a Utah Jazz fan. It wasn't the perfect exact result that you wanted, but it's so close. The NBA draft lottery yields a number 2 overall pick for the Utah Jazz in a very, very deep draft class. And you are within striking distance now of a franchise-changing player. At least that's what we think, right? You talk to the pundits, you read the articles, you watch them play college hoops, and the guys at the top of this draft in that 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 and 5 range are all pretty darn good basketball players with incredible traits. And most importantly, you are going to be picking no lower than 2, which means you don't have to figure out best player available, or do we go for someone that's a positional need? Do we really try to take a swing on a point guard here? You get the best player available, not at 5, not at 6, not at 7, but at 2. The Delta Center is being renovated inside. The new look, new feel building is going to coincide perfectly with a third year of Utah Mammoth hockey, where you're now a playoff caliber team that expects to be a playoff caliber team moving forward, and the Utah Jazz turning the page to be an actual let's try this and maybe playoff or at least play in contender with, hopefully, I'm knocking on wood here, a healthy roster that will include a top flight rookie that looks like either Darren Peterson, AJ DeBonsa, maybe a Cam Boozer, and suddenly the pre-draft evaluation of all of these guys, you're really going to go through it all with a fine-tooth comb. I think the outcome is somewhat inevitable here for the Utah Jazz, but that'll be partially determinant on what the Washington Wizards want to do, what the Washington Wizards are in love with. And the mock drafts have it, kind of split, but heavy lean towards AJ DeBonsa at number 1. Does that mean the Utah Jazz will have to, if they want AJ DeBonsa, move up to number 1? It appears that the Utah Jazz fan base is split on the prospect of taking a swing on that, but that's what we're here for. That's what we're talking about. I put a poll out there at Real OC Sports on Twitter last night. Will the Utah Jazz find a way to end up drafting AJ DeBonsa? 1/3 of you say yes. 2/3 of you say no. I believe that the Utah Jazz are going to do whatever it takes, barring just an absolute stonewall from Minnesota, or not Minnesota, from Washington. And it appears, by the way, the early explorations of these conversations, some people are reporting that Washington may be willing to move out of that number 1 spot. My belief is that the Utah Jazz are going to draft AJ DeBonsa, that there's a 92% plus chance that the Utah Jazz are either going to draft him at 2 with assurances and knowing that Washington wants to go with Darren Peterson at number 1, or more likely that the Utah Jazz are going to trade up to get number 1. Now, why do I think that? Do I think AJ is significantly better than Darren Peterson. I don't know if he is better than Darren Peterson. AJ DeBonsa doesn't have the same injury question marks, the same commitment question marks, the same attitude question marks that Darren Peterson has, and maybe he's getting rid of those all in these interviews and these pre-draft meetings and things like that. But more importantly, more saliently, if you are the owner of a franchise, as Ryan Smith is, if you have created this vision in your own mind, whether it's realistic or not, that you can have your alma mater, your beloved college basketball program, BYU, become a breeding ground of talent for your professional franchise, and you had 2 years ago, 3 years ago, decided, you know what, I'm going to go this pie-in-the-sky dream that this number one player in the country, this AJ DeBonsa kid, this generational talent, he's not only going to end up at my school, and I'm going to pay for that, I'm going to bankroll that, or be an important part of bankrolling that. I'm going to help facilitate that by making sure that we have an NBA caliber coach at BYU, that Kevin Young and him have a good relationship. I'm going to snowplow all the obstacles in front of getting AJ DeBonsa to BYU. And then maybe, just maybe, there's this little glimmer of hope in my eye that eventually he ends up in a Utah Jazz uniform, because we're tanking, we're suffering, we're pushing ourselves all the way down to the bottom of the NBA standings with potentially this young man, not just a good young man, not just a particular abstract concept of a great player in mind, with this particular guy in mind. Now I have a relationship with him. I've already paid him money. I know his family. I feel like I know exactly what he's going to be in the NBA. I know that he likes the state of Utah enough that we could potentially extend him after a rookie contract is over with minimal resistance. All signs for me point toward the Utah Jazz organization doing whatever is necessary to draft AJ DeBonsa. I don't think we need to complicate it with, hey, Darren Peterson might be a better fit. Hey, Darren Peterson might be kind of this Ace Bailey situation where he's a little bit misunderstood as a college player. And as soon as he gets to the NBA, that's his dream. That's what he's here for. And he's going to be the consummate professional. He's going to show up. He's going to work. He's going to develop. He's going to be great. I hope that is the case for Darren Peterson. I really do. I hope that that young man ends up delivering on all the potential of his physical traits. But the owner of your team is already in love with AJ DeBonsa. He has already invested, literally and figuratively, in AJ DeBonsa's basketball future. And he is so tantalizingly close to being able to pick up a phone and call AJ DeBonsa and say, it's a done deal, man. You're going number one. And we have number one. Well, we don't. You have number two. The only way to fully guarantee that you can get, that you can get AJ DeBonsa, the only way to make it an unequivocal, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that guy is in a Jazz uniform, and we are completing this mental picture. The only way to make that happen is by moving up a spot. Now, if you had lotteried out at number 5, it's probably too big of a lift. It's probably too much of a sacrifice to leapfrog all the way up to number 1. I don't think it would be reasonable. I don't think your fan base would support it. I don't think you could do it without compromising some of the draft, some of the roster that you've already put together, some of the work that you've already done, some of the stuff that we're already like, okay, I see what you're doing here, Angels. Austin, I like what you've done with this trade. I like how you've developed Ace so far. Okay, I think we got we're cooking with gas a little bit here. I don't think if you had to leapfrog from even 4 all the way up to number 1, that you could do it without sort of undermining some of what you've built already. I think this Utah Jazz organization could get to number 1 from number 2 at a relatively low cost. And I say relatively because it is still going to be expensive. But if the dream has been AJ DeBonsa to the Utah Jazz via BYU, that's the pipeline. You can make it happen. And I think they're going to do everything they can to make it happen. And I really, really, really am curious to know if there's any level of friction or disagreement in that process between ownership and management, between the money guy and the basketball guys. It seems as though everyone has been pretty cohesive and in lockstep and like, yeah, this is what we want to have happen. They all speak so glowingly of one another. They all talk about pulling on the same rope. They all talk about the family, the culture, the leadership, the team. If Austin Ainge actually likes Darren Peterson better and doesn't want to try to take a swing to jump up a spot, does the owner force it? That has not been his MO as far as I'm aware. Or if they catch wind that it's actually going to be the Wizards that fall in love with Darren Peterson and are going to take Darren Peterson, and Austin Ainge and all the other basketball minds in the building are like, no, that's what we really need. That's what we really want. If you want to be a playoff team sooner than later, if you ever want to be a championship caliber team, that's the one we need. Can any convincing override the love affair that already exists between ownership and AJ DeBonsa? And I want to make it clear, I'm in that same boat. I love what AJ DeBonsa was and is. Was at BYU, was as a top player in high school, and is as a top prospect. He appears to be a guy who's doing everything, as far as he can tell, the right way. I think that is massively important for this Utah Jazz organization. I think that is as important. No, I think it's more important than top flight ceiling on talent. I think cultural fit here matters more than it does in other places. I think the ability to re-sign a player, especially if he starts to deliver on the promise that this top 3, 4, 5 guys in the draft are capable of, I think that's massively important because nobody else re-signs with the Utah Jazz. Since John and Carl, your best players, have all loved you and left you. And AJ DeBonsa is the one least likely to do exactly that. For me, that's worth trading up some draft capital. That's worth trading up a veteran player if you have to. That's worth trading to try to leap one spot up and get the guy who fits in Utah, who fits with your vision as ownership. And whether you think that AJ is not as good of a player as Darren Peterson or not, I think the reasonable thing as a fan is to expect that the guy who has laid out this vision, whether it's realistic or not, has laid out this vision, is going to pursue that vision. Ryan Smith seems to be putting this plan in place, and it can actually happen. Do you know how unlikely that is in sports? In the pathway of modern sports, you know what? I really love this Diego Pavia kid. I'm going to pay his way into Vanderbilt. And then I'm going to make sure that my beloved franchise, the Denver Broncos, drafts him. You can't do it. Guys are not built this way, either the player or the coach or the owner or somebody doesn't get it. Doesn't have the talent for it, doesn't have the vision for it, doesn't have the work ethic for it, whatever. These types of like Cinderella's not fairy tale stories, they're not even possible most of the time when we're talking about an individual pathway from amateurism to professionalism in sports. How many guys have we seen grow up as a fan of a place, end up playing for that place? Very few. How many times have you seen an owner, man, I really, really wish that we could get this. I'm a Stanford guy. That quarterback's a Stanford guy. I own a team now. I really would like to get that guy. It just is not the way it works out. And Ryan Smith he's got it at his fingertips. The possibility of this dude that he has bankrolled through college, that has helped put his alma mater on a different echelon in respect, in conversation, in competition, in college basketball. That guy now could play for your professional franchise, and you're out there telling me you wouldn't make it happen at whatever cost. I think he's going to do it. I think the Jazz are going to do it through him. And I think AJ DeBonsa is going to be in a Utah Jazz uniform. And I, for one, think that is great for the team, great for the state, great for the franchise, great for the future of what Utah Jazz basketball could be. 877-353-0700. Tell me what you think about it. Tweet at me at RealOC Sports. Go vote on the poll. Will the Utah Jazz find a way to end up drafting AJ DeBonsa? James Peterson, our producer, has been patiently waiting. He's got some thoughts on this. James, what do you think?
You laid out such a beautiful thing there, OC. The problem is that would be the wrong move. That would be the absolute wrong move, because here's a flaw in what you're saying. You think that the price would not be very steep to move up one spot. The Wizards know the Wizards know how desperate Ryan Smith may or may not be to make this happen. They will gouge the Jazz. They will ask for Lauri Markkanen. They will ask for Walker Kessler. They will ask for Trey J. Not all three, but they'll ask for at least one of those guys, and that would be a terrible thing for the Jazz to give up at this juncture. Also, they're probably going to ask for they're going to ask for multiple first-round picks. I would not give up anything to draft a superstar when you can pick a superstar for free. That's the way I see this. You say don't overcomplicate it with all of the Will Darren actually, are the cramping things going to be a long-term concern? Is he actually going to be better than AJ DeBonsa? I think you're overcomplicating it by trying to move up one spot to when you can get a guy who's going to be probably just as good, if not better, for free. I think you settle in with the number 2 pick. You make your calculation between Darren Peterson and Cam Boozer. I think the draw to draft Cam Boozer is going to be strong because Carlos Boozer is in the front office. I think Darren Peterson is the right pick here. The only way that you should draft AJ DeBonsa is if the Wizards decide not to draft AJ DeBonsa at this juncture, in my opinion.
So I think Darren Peterson is the only questionable pick that you could make here. If the Wizards draft AJ, and they likely will if they stay at number 1, right? Because they've started to rebuild themselves as well. Now, they were not punished the same way the Utah Jazz were for tanking after they added some stars to their roster. I'm sure the Wizards are like, man, I'd love to see what a lineup that features Trae Young and AJ DeBonsa and Anthony Davis and all these cats. I'd love to see what that looks like. They're celebrating. I've read the articles. They're celebrating in Washington over this, as they should. Now, I've deliberately left out the Cam Boozer name. Kingston Flemings is not a number 2 pick, so I'm going to leave him out of the conversation. It's one of those 3, like you said. Boozer.
Caleb Wilson, potentially. Jazz are not going to take him at 2, but he's a top 3 talent as well. The problem is there's 4 top 3 talents in the draft. So that guy well before Kingston Flemings in like the talent gap. Flemings might go 5, but as far as the talent gap goes, Wilson's in there too. But yeah, I'm with you. I think the Jazz, I'm afraid of what you just laid out, that Ryan Smith is going to hear the Angels say, Ryan, we don't need to do anything to move up to 1. We're going to get a potential star at 2. And he says, but do you know all that I did to get AJ here? Whatever it takes to get 1. I'm afraid of that. Because I don't think it's the right move. To be fair to Ryan
Smith, he might not feel that way anymore.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't.
He might be like, yeah, dude, I love AJ. AJ did some good things for us at BYU, but AJ didn't carry this team to an Elite 8 the way that I thought he was going to. So, yeah, let's move on to something else. Maybe, but I just don't. I mean, I'm putting some of my own emotional thinking onto this process for the Utah Jazz, right?
And I understand you and the BYU fans in particular, and other Jazz fans who fall in love with AJ DeBonsa and the idea of, hey, if only he could come to the Utah Jazz. I myself have thought that way, but you have, like, Danny Ainge said when he got here, I remove emotion from any decision making I make. Austin Ames didn't say that at his press conference, but Ryan Smith at the press conference that we both attended, you asked the famous question, right? That's about tanking this year. Ryan Smith said,
which by the way, he ultimately lied about.
He ultimately lied about, yeah.
we probably knew that's what that answer was in all of its brevity, because this is the outcome they were looking for. You couldn't afford to compete to try and end up drafting number 9 in this year's draft, because then our conversation today is drastically different. We're talking about how they have failed to set the future up, how they have wasted Lauri Markkanen's best years for no reason at all, how they have talked about, trying to get back into playoff contention and not being convinced that a top 10 player is capable of doing it. What you are laying out, James, is the general consensus around anyone in basketball who's been following college basketball. People are looking at this draft class and saying, well, if you're in the top 3, maybe even in the top 4, maybe even in the top 5, you're getting a guy with star potential, true all-star, future all-star, perhaps perennial all-star potential. That's how deep this draft is, according to the evaluators. Now, we could be wrong about AJ and Darren Peterson and Cam Boozer and Caleb Wilson and everyone else. We could be, right? It could be some second-round yahoo or a guy down at 27 who emerges as the best of all this class. That's happened a few times before.
Gordy likes to remind us of that. Every year, someone late in the first round or in the second round becomes an all-star.
And like in the case of like a Nikola Jokic, who wasn't thought of at all heading into his draft, right? That player becomes one of the best in the world or the best in the world. It could happen here. But the thought process of being like, hey, we're foolproof at 1, at 2, at 3, because whoever we get there is good or good enough or is going to change our franchise, I think is not the right way to evaluate this.
I just think nothing's ever foolproof. The reason I say it's the wrong move to move a ton of assets, and the Wizards, if you think the Wizards won't ask for a core player, you're fooling yourself. They know how much, whether it's real at this point or not, they know how much Ryan Smith may have emotionally invested into having AJ DeBonsa. They know that there's a perception of that. They're going to gouge you if you try to take number 1. You should not take that bait if you're the Utah Jazz. But I'll say this too. Ryan said at that press conference with Austin Ames, he said when he was asked what is the hierarchy here, Ryan said Austin and Danny. Austin has full decision making. Danny has a part in that too. Through me.
That's right.
Meaning he
is the governor of the Utah Jazz. They advise him, and he respects their opinion.
Yeah,
and he takes their expertise into consideration. And I believe it, even though Ryan Smith, I don't believe Ryan Smith has the same blind spots that a lot of owners do. I don't think he's as detached from his fan base or from reality as a lot of owners are. I really think that he's like a man of the people, so to speak. But he's also a guy who has in my opinion, very clearly laid out this plan. I need
too much risk to make it happen at this point.
I only need one thing I need one truth serum answer from Ryan Smith to be the ultimate determinant on whether or not I think the Utah Jazz, whether or not they should is a different conversation, but whether or not the Utah Jazz will do everything in their power to draft AJ DeBonsa. The only truth serum question I need to ask Ryan Smith is, did you get what you paid for out of AJ at BYU? And if the answer to that question is yes, if they are fully satisfied customers with that entire transaction, and by the way, he wasn't the only person supporting AJ DeBonsa's NIL deals at BYU, but let's just say, because he's the only one of those individuals who is the owner of the Utah Jazz, we get to sit him down. We get to put the, number one police detective in front of him. We get to inject his veins with the truth serum. We get to put that hot light on him. And we get to say, are you satisfied with what AJ DeBonsa did at BYU? Do you blame AJ in any way for BYU's underperformance? And if he can tell you, yes, I'm satisfied. No, I do not blame AJ. AJ is the player we thought he was going to be. AJ is the guy. I think that this team is going to take a swing. And short of acquiescing to trading away a core player, and by the way, when I talk about core players, I'm only talking about Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. and Ace Bailey. I think that everyone else would be up for grabs for the Wizards. I think that if they love the development of Keontae George, you might be able to get Keontae George. If you like what Walker Kessler can do for you, I think you might be able to get Walker Kessler. And that makes me a lot less of a fan of this idea, by the way. If it's only draft capital, if you can negotiate, because the Angels are famous for this, if they can negotiate down to a place where it's a value proposition that the rest of the league maybe doesn't agree with, but the Angels pull a fast one again, and all you're giving up is future question marks in order to get this certainty, absolutely that's a good trade. As expensive as it could be, 3 future first rounders, fine. This is the draft where you're supposed to be getting a generational talent. Go for it right now. The only one that I have a question about in that top 3, let's say they stay at number 2, is Darren Peterson. I know that he's the best positional fit. I know that there are a lot of people out there that are saying, oh, absolutely, this guy is the best player in this draft. But we don't have questions about AJ DeBonsa, and we don't have questions about Cam Boozer. Darren Peterson is the one you have questions about. And maybe they're unfair, and maybe they're unwarranted, but they are questions. If you drafted Cam Boozer at number 2, the Utah Jazz fan base would be like, all right, sweet, we get another Boozer. All right, cool. He's likely or more likely to sign a second contract here. That actually makes sense. AJ, I've already made that case. And you probably will, the most likely outcome is you get Darren Peterson at number 2, right? All of us are holding our breath for 4 years. Everyone.
Well,
in that
7.
new gondola seating at the Delta Center, you're watching from this bird's eye view, and you're like, wow, look how cool this spaceship seat I'm in is. And you're going, man, Darren Peterson, look, I'm so happy he's been healthy. I'm so happy that he got a better creatine. I'm so glad he's not cramping anymore. And even if in the best case scenario, you're like, does he like it here? Will he ever like it here? If he wins here, is he going to do what Donovan Mitchell did, what Gordon Hayward did, what Darren Williams ended up doing? Like, are we going to love him and have him leave? That's my number one concern about that number 2 pick, because from a basketball standpoint, I don't think there'll be any question that you've got a talented enough player at 2 to make it make sense in Darren Peterson. The value is there. But for how long and how healthy and how committed and how dedicated and how everything else, you don't have those questions about the other guys.
Let me ask you this though, OC. It's just going in the vein of like, should you try to trade up for your guy that you want the most, AJ DeBonsa, right? Let's say Paris RV sale you were at, what, 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
The owner and operator, he went on and told you some of these used RVs are like, they still have the wrapping on it. Like, these are not, I'm not sure these are actually used, but they're, we're giving you a used price on it. So let's say, because you hit it off so well with Paris RV, let's say he's like, I will give you one of these RVs. Just it's technically used, but the wrapping's still on it. It's new. I'll give you that for free because we're such good friends. Or you're like, you know what? there's the same one that I can buy for $25,000 at a different place. There's no way you'd be like, I want to pay money for the thing that I can get for free. That's what we're talking about
the
here.
You're getting at, but it's not. But I'm not buying the same one. I'm buying one I like better. I'm buying one that's slightly
better.
I'm buying one that's slightly bigger and that I have fewer questions about reliability on. Right? I have a lot more peace of mind on that one, and it is maybe 25% more expensive or $25,000 more or whatever. And that all comes down to how much do I have, right? If I have the money to buy the thing that I think is better, that I have a relationship with, that I have fallen in love with, that is the color that I want, right? It's got that cool, like two-tone sparkle paint on my RV, whatever. As long as I got the money, James, absolutely I'm paying the extra $25,000. If I'm a billionaire or a millionaire, and that doesn't mean a ton to me, or even if I'm like, just a happy, healthy, six figures kind of guy, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? It's a little bit of a stretch, but it's something that I think is going to pay off for me in the end. Absolutely, yes, I am paying the bigger price at the other Paris RV lot. I just am, because this is how consumerism works. If all of us were just in love with the most practical cars out there, the one that makes the most sense financially and from a maintenance standpoint, everyone in the world would be driving Toyota Camrys around. You would see no G-Wagons on the road. There would be no such thing as a sports car. But when you got a little bit extra and you fall in love with the idea of something, Ryan Smith probably, this is a perfect analogy, James. I'm glad you brought this up. I bet you $1,000 Ryan Smith has a car in a garage somewhere that he loves just because he loves it. Doesn't make sense, is a gas guzzler, probably terrible with maintenance. Maybe he drives it 3 times a year. He's not exactly getting use out of it, but he bought it because 21-year-old or 18-year-old or 14-year-old Ryan Smith had a poster of it on his wall and said, when I make it big, I'm going to buy that car. And I bet you he owns that car today because he can. AJ DeBonsa is the equivalent of that. I want that guy. I'm going to get that guy to my school, and I'm going to get that guy to my franchise. And I kind of don't care how much it costs me. That's why I think AJ ends up being in a Jazz uniform.
I really hope they're not listening to you when they make the decision. I'll just leave it at that. It would be the absolute wrong move. Even if Darren Peterson doesn't end up being good, you risk nothing by taking a guy who could possibly be a all-star,
now you've gone
all-star
too far.
Player.
Now you've gone too far.
Nothing.
Now you're saying I'm okay even if Darren Peterson ends up not being good. Then you've wasted your number 2 pick.
From the risk standpoint, I am, OC. If you trade a core player and 3 or 4 first-round picks, that's way worse than Darren Peterson not working out. That's way worse.
Well, I don't think it's going to cost that much to move up.
The Wizards are going to gouge him. Why wouldn't they?
Well, I think they'll do their best to gouge him, but in this draft, 1 pick, I just don't think that the Jazz will go for that. I think that there's a threshold. It's probably 3 picks. It's probably a borderline core player. I don't think you're really at risk of losing a Lowry Markkanen here. You know what? We'll see what Craig Bolerjack thinks about it. The television voice of the Utah Jazz, I'm sure, was just as thrilled as the rest of us to see their name come up at number 2 in yesterday's NBA draft lottery. So, what's the calculus like for Bowler? We'll find out in 3 minutes on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. All right, welcome back to the Sean O'Connell Show. Welcome in Craig Bolerjack, voice of the Jazz, broadcasting legend, hoops insider. Craig Bolerjack, welcome back to the program. How are you, sir?
Hey, OC, I'm well. How you been?
Oh man, I'm pumped. Like I think a lot of people in this Jazz sphere of influence are pumped right now because Mother's Day gift to all the Jazz mothers out there and to all the Jazz mothers that are attached to degenerate Jazz fans that were just hoping and praying and wishing that the draft lottery would yield a positive outcome for this beloved franchise in Salt Lake City. And it is not pick number one, but it is close enough. It's pick number two in a very deep draft that belongs now to the Utah Jazz. Your initial reaction when you heard the news?
Well, I sat down like I did a year ago when the Jazz had the 17 win record, worst in the NBA, like the Washington Wizards, who had 17 this year. And I thought, okay, let's go with the odds. The best I was expecting was maybe a 5 spot. And then when they bypassed that and I realized the Jazz are going to move in to the top 4, then top 3, I go, wow, this is definitely a franchise changer, OC. I mean, this is the first time the lottery has treated the Jazz positively. You move to 2, and there are multiple options that are on the table for Austin Ainge, Danny, Ryan, and Justin Zanuck. It's exciting. I tell you, the last 3 years, I'll be honest, it's a challenge to call games when you don't know who's going to play. A couple of 10-day contract guys come and go, and you just have to adjust the best you can. But, Jazz fans stayed with it, and now the reward comes. Health will be number one for this entire group like it is, each and every year, each and every game. But, man, it's exciting. There's a lot of possibilities here. Assets that the Jazz do have, do they use those to improve their status to 1? The Wizards are an interesting group because they used their 6th pick, remember, last year on Trey Johnson. They already have another point guard in Trae Young. Johnson's the 2, and Trey's the 1. But what do they do, and what are they seeking? How close are they, like the Jazz, in the rebuild? The Jazz are much ahead, I think you'll agree. And so that's part of the whole, I tell you, just the questions and the excitement and the possibilities are endless out there, depending on what, the front office, which I always love to say is beyond anyone's pay grade except those guys, on what they're actually going to do, because they do have a lot of options. They really do.
I agree with you, and I'm fascinated by the idea that you just mentioned. The possibility to improve from 2 to 1. And it feels like for me, the obvious reason to do that would be to get AJ DeBonsa. And this is further fascinating and more complicated because there's already a relationship with the owner and governor of the Utah Jazz and AJ DeBonsa. Like, Ryan was instrumental in getting AJ to go to BYU and helping him to be what he is now from an athlete perspective, from a professional perspective, from an endorser perspective. It feels like that relationship is pretty important in this particular decision-making process. But I also don't want to put it out there. I think that Ryan Smith is going to put his thumb down on brilliant basketball minds like the Ainges and say, no, you do what I say, you get me this guy at all costs. I don't think that's the way he's run things up to this point. So I'm curious what that negotiation, that conversation looks like in the front office. And you're right, it's above my pay grade, certainly, but it's not like it's 3 great players at the top, none of whom have any relationship with the state of Utah, with the Utah Jazz at all. It's Carlos Boozer's son. It's a guy who doesn't have any relationship with the state or the franchise. And it's a guy who they've already laid a path for to come through BYU to the Utah Jazz. It feels like those are significant things in this decision-making process.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is you can't get so excited about the possibility that you overpay, that you jump into the 3-year to 4-year rebuild. And gosh, OC, everything this fan base has gone through, it has to be a solid decision. The assets that you have developed, I think, are uber important to discuss here. The Keontae's Ace will be in his second year. Walker coming off shoulder if they choose to match whatever money that is offered him in the restricted free agent market. You got Triple J in the house now. You have a Bryce Sensabaugh who has developed and shown that he can be a sixth man type scorer. You know, Cody and Flip would be question marks depending on what they do and are those assets. You have a Conchar who is just everywhere, hands in every passing lane, a defender who came over in the trade with Triple J. So, man, we could talk about all the assets the Jazz have and what they've built and the agony at times that it's taken to get to this point. So this decision, whether to stay at 2 or try to approach the Wizards, but then what does Washington really want? Like I just said, they've got guard play that they spent obviously their 6th pick on in Trey Johnson, and then they could obviously help themselves with AJ. They could go Darren Peterson, who is highly thought of, but again, there's some concerns. Pulling himself out of games, the cramping, all the above. I think the interview process, OC, for the Jazz may be one of the most intriguing parts, because if they decide to move on and stay at 2 and Peterson, Boozer, or Caleb Wilson is out there too, who is just a beast on both ends of the floor, there's 4 really strong franchise-changing players in this whole mix. And so I think it depends. I've asked the front office personnel multiple times, and it's kind of the same answer I get with even Scotty Layden in the day and, Dennis Lindsey, Kevin O'Connor. They always say they go for the best athlete, the best possible player they can put their hands on, not necessarily position, unless you just have an absolute gaping hole like maybe Memphis does with the John Morant situation. But it's really intriguing. How it ends up on draft night is anybody's guess, but there are really some high-level players that are going to help this franchise. And you know what? They're on the cusp of just making a turn, much like Detroit did. And look where they are now. 2 years ago, and they can make a jump fast. I think the Jazz are in that same category. I do.
Greg Bolerjack, our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking about the Utah Jazz and their number 2 draft pick just obtained in yesterday's NBA draft lottery. How much consideration goes into the possibility of re-signing a guy after he's done with his rookie contract? It seems more likely, and again, I'm just prognosticating. I don't have any real knowledge here. It seems more likely that AJ DeBonsa would be willing to re-sign with the Jazz. He already knows the state. He already seems to like it here. It seems more likely that a Cam Boozer, who has a relationship with the state and whose dad works in the organization, is more likely to re-sign here. Is that something that the front office even should be considering with this draft pick?
Yeah, that's a good question. The Jazz, remember, with Donovan, made it clear, I think he wanted to exit. That was a tough time, too. COVID turned everybody upside down and relationships were strained. I get it. D. Will and Booze both departed. Both have said publicly they should have stayed. I tell you, OC, it's interesting, isn't it? When you're 19, 18, 19, 20, and agents think that, they're going to sign you to these year contracts for shoes and other endorsements in, quote, bigger, larger cities. It all sounds, nice and good, but, an injury here, ask Gordon Hayward, right, in Boston. You can't predict. I think that's why the interview process is so important, to know just the growth, who they are. Do they know who they are? How solid are they? I mean, Keontae, I got to give him a lot of credit to kind of look inside himself last summer and really dive in deep, and comes back more polished as a professional, more comfortable within his own skin. I really got to praise him for doing that. It's hard to do. And I think as this league gets younger and younger, those interviews and knowing who you're getting, because the investment, OC, is so big. And the point is, after the rookie contract, and then you've put all the effort and money into developing the player, then you have to stand back and say, see ya, and you may not get a return, by the way, i.e., Gordon Hayward. And so I think that this whole process about mental health, maturity, 18, 19, making the transition from a college to a professional player in a man's world, man, it plays big. And I'm sure the process is shortly, if not already underway, for the Jazz to evaluate and get a chance, during the combines to kind of, just go ahead and get an opportunity to get to know these players even better. Darren Peterson, that kid can play. Let's be honest. I mean, the film they've shown recently in a few games I saw this past winter, unbelievable. Boozer statistically is unreal. AJ out of sight, led the league, led the nation in scoring, and Caleb Wilson. I mean, he's off the chart on just being a two-way beast. I mean, offensively and defensively. And I think that's the other thing, OC, is that the Jazz have preached and say they build to play for this team, to stay on this roster. What do you have to do? Got to play D. So I think that's going to come into the equation bigger than we may think. I really do.
When we're looking at the way that this team already has its core in place and wants to add with this number 2 pick, the assumption is the top of this draft is deep enough that whoever it is, Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer, AJ DeBonsa, they're going to come in and they're going to be a day one immediate starter in the NBA, immediate developing star in the NBA. Let's pretend, Bowler, that whoever it is, it takes a little bit longer to get rolling and that you just have the core that's already together, right? And they're not tanking, they're not resting, they're not doing random surgeries, but you've got Walker and you've got Trey J and you've got Lowry and you've got Keontae and you've got Ace Bailey and maybe a rookie that's taken a little bit longer to come together. What the Jazz have already, pre-draft, all of them on the floor together, are they enough to start this leap forward and maybe get back at least into a play-in, even if the draft pick doesn't work out or takes some time to develop?
I mean, on paper, yeah. I think the excitement level is, I'm just doing a survey at the end of the season with guys that I trust around the league, broadcasters who know the West, especially. Yeah, they all believe the Jazz are a play-in and above. And again, it all comes into play, OC, about health. And, you see who gets knocked out of a playoff series or right now stumbling with injury, how big it is with just one player. How do you survive? It's depth, right? It's depth. And the Jazz are building that depth. Bryce, Flip, Isaiah, Conchar. Do you keep Nurk? Do you keep Caleb? I mean, all those things are going to come into play on how far the Jazz can actually move through the Western Conference. With most of the nights, it's a buzzsaw, especially with OKC and San Antonio. They're not going anywhere, and they're young still. And OKC's got a chance to go back-to-back as NBA champs. And right behind is a guy named Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs. Can the Jazz join that elite group? They sure hope so. It's been a while since the Jazz have been elite in the West. Guys like Stockton and Malone, but now you have new names that, everything's cyclical, right? Is it the Jazz turn again? You have to hope. You get a number 2 pick. And this one you got to make right. And you make a great point. They've built for this, and they have some established vets and young players they've developed. Is there pressure for AJ or Peterson or Boozer or Caleb Wilson or anyone else they may decide to pick? Acuff is another name that's, always in the top 5 or 6. Do you have to rush him? I mean, last year, Ace was thick early, remember, in the season. Then he had the hamstring that he had to work through. So it wasn't an easy transition. But what the Jazz liked about Ace was his ability to fight through that, mental toughness, and still continued to develop and got himself into the starting position. But it was also by attrition, right? Because the Jazz, had to make sure they were in a position to do what they did. And that's to grab a top 3 spot. It happens to be number 2. But I don't think there's a lot of pressure on the rookie, whoever they pick, to be an immediate impact. because I think there are pieces in place that will allow him 10, 15 games to say, okay, get comfortable, understand, and then make your move. And then they have to make some roster decisions. But, OC, as I ramble here, I think what Will has talked to me about is that and he's talked to all the media, but I mean, just it's the options that he has now for the first time in what will be his 5th year with the Utah Jazz. He can go big, he can go small, he can use speed, he can go off ball with Key and let Isaiah do his thing. There's so many options, and this number 2 pick will only add to that. And that's what I think is the most intriguing and exciting thing about what the Jazz have.
Before I let you go, you mentioned Victor Wembanyama. The Spurs saw a different side of him, a little bit angrier Victor Wembanyama, and ejected Victor Wembanyama in a series that's now tighter than I think a lot of people thought it would be. What's going to happen in that Minnesota-San Antonio series?
Minnesota is a surprise, man. They're gritty. They just keep coming. Ant's back. Rudy's played really some great, postseason defense. Mike Conley chips in what he can at, what is he, 37, going on 38? He's just never-ending time machine like LeBron. But the Lakers' run is about done from my standpoint. But it's going to be interesting to see if Victor, young, talented, but that one was surprising. OC, he got a little loose, didn't he? And I'd say it was a high chin music, and it wasn't just a soft touch. That was like a Muhammad Ali knockout, right on the chin. And so that's kind of a message too from the league to Victor, and we'll see how he responds. But it's been good playoff series. There's been some good hoop, intense. New York seems to finally righted the ship a bit. Brunson's tough. Man, that guy is just a tough guy for his size, and you have to have those special talents to play in this league as a 6-footer, and he's got them. And Oklahoma City still, you saw what I saw. Still, I think the elite team in the NBA.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch this. I don't know if anyone's going to be able to knock off the Thunder, but that's why we play the games, and we will continue to watch them. And soon enough, you'll hear Craig Boller-Jack on Jazz basketball with a much more interesting and exciting outlook on the future of this franchise. Wow. I bet you're looking forward to that, Bowler, calling games for a team that's trying to win again next season.
3 years is, we kind of just, as my dad always said, go plow the field. That's what we tried to do. And, watch the young players grow. They did. And you know what? I think the fans ought to get a tip of the hat. They stayed with it. I mean, Delta Center was pretty much, packed in every night to see what the Jazz, who they were, who they brought in, who was making the strides to be a part of this roster. They saw it. They grew. They watched these players grow. And, for me, calling games with talent, high-level talent, like a Triple J and a Markkanen and what Walker can do as a defensive player at the rim with his right and left hand, I mean, that's exciting. And watching Key and Ace, wow. Yeah, it makes everyone's job easier when you can talk about winning and the positive things on the floor. And I can't wait. It's going to be fun. And, you just hope again that health stays with the Jazz, but also they build that they could take a hit if necessary with an injury, which is going to happen. To what degree, you never know. But like Oklahoma City, and when Boston won the championship nearly 3 years ago now, it was all because of depth and defense. And Oklahoma City is deep, and they play in-your-face D. And the Jazz, you know what? They're trying to get to that same level. But I think the depth part is what gets you through the tough times. When you can put a 6th, 7th, or 8th player on the floor, fill the gap until your starter comes back. And I think the Jazz are on the cusp of that too.
Bowler, I always appreciate your time and your perspective, my friend. Thank you so much for hopping on today. We'll chat again soon.
Hey, you bet. Take care. Have a great one.
That is Craig Boller-Jack, voice of the Utah Jazz. He's a legend. You've heard him calling plenty of games, and he will be calling games that actually matter next year. Hey, make sure you get down to Shields for the Doc Dogs event that's happening on May 29th. It's in the parking lot. If you're not familiar with Doc Dogs, close your eyes and picture this. Retrievers, Labradors, the occasional healer mix, just as pumped as any living creature could possibly be to do nothing but run down a dock, leap off the edge of that dock, and land in a pool of water while we measure their performance through enthusiasm. How far do they jump to catch that rubber ducky, to catch that bone, to catch that lead that is thrown by their owner? That's how you win it. It's a simple sport, but it is amazing, and the dogs absolutely love it. Your family's going to love it. Head down to Shields for Doc Dogs. They're going to have food trucks. They're going to have great deals on all things in store. They're going to have vendors out there giving away things, raffling off prizes, and showing you their wares. But most importantly, the Doc Dogs, big air, huge splashes, nonstop action. It's family fun all day long in the parking lot of the Shields in Sandy down off 114th South. That's May 29th, the Doc Dogs. You'll see me and my little crew down there because anything that involves dogs and water, it's a perfect start to your summer. Get down to Shields. Tell them OC sent you. All right, we'll double up here. Sarah Todd is going to join us. And guess what we're talking about with Sarah Todd? She's in the room when number 2 comes down. Maybe my conspiracy theories have been all wrong after all. Dare I say it? It's Utah's #1 sports talk, the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Welcome to hour number 2 on a Monday of the Sean O'Connell Show. Hopefully all the mothers out there had a great Mother's Day. The biggest news in the local sporting world is, of course, the Utah Jazz getting the number 2 pick in the upcoming NBA draft. The draft lottery played out in a way that favored the Utah Jazz. Now, they didn't win it. They've never won it. They probably never will win it. But it played out in a way that favored the Utah Jazz more than anyone, basically, than anyone expected. Or there's a lot of these next, what we're about 40 days away from when the draft itself actually happens. These next couple of weeks here, these next several weeks here are going to be filled with people dissecting interviews and evaluating facial expressions and lip reading and all this crazy stuff. And that is just part of the nature of the beast, right? Finding out all the things to not like about Darren Peterson, all the things to not like about Cam Boozer, all the things to not like about AJ DeBonsa. I saw we had an interesting question come in on Twitter, and I think it's worth addressing because there is no way to know what the camp of a player is actually thinking or feeling. What the parents are saying, what the agent is saying, what the trusted high school or college coach is saying. And there is an assumption, and I'm carrying this assumption forward. I'm perpetuating this assumption, so I'm complicit here. There's an assumption that AJ DeBonsa and to some degree Cam Boozer would be more loyal to Utah than Darren Peterson will be, or than Caleb Wilson will be, or whoever. And the question that came in on Twitter is, why do we feel this way? AJ DeBonsa was in Utah for college because he was the highest paid player, or one of the highest paid players in all of college basketball at that university. He was here for a year, not even a whole year. And it's, yeah, okay. He also played his high school ball here. And I don't think it's an assumption that he would be loyal. The organization has to hold up its end of the bargain. Of course, the NBA has incentivized players now to stay with the team that drafts them. You can sign for more money in an extra year if you stay with the team that drafts you. That by itself is a strong incentive to say, all right, well, that guy will stay. Now, of course, if it's Darren Peterson that they draft, that incentive in place for him as well. But I do think, even if it's not like an expressed promise, even if it's not like, well, yeah, of course, I love Utah and I would rather stay. I just think knowing what you're getting into in this place and already having a relationship with Utah, I mean, we're not this like podunk small town backwater, but it is a unique spot for professional athletes to live. And sometimes they mean that in a good way, and sometimes it's not a fit. Not to lean too heavy on a very, very old narrative now, but the nightlife is not the same. If that's important to a player, maybe Utah. I mean, if you like nightlife and you can be in New York or Miami, or eventually, because they're going to get a franchise, Vegas, or you're going to be in Salt Lake City, like those things matter. If you're a family man and you got 3 or 4 kids, you'd probably rather be in Utah than in a place like Miami. Maybe. I don't know. I think it's a valid question. Why do we assume somebody like AJ DeBonsa or somebody like Cam Boozer would be more likely to re-sign with the Utah Jazz? But I think that there is a practical element to that assumption, or a practical element to being more convinced, because you already have relationships here. It's not uprooting yourself and planting down in an NBA city where you have no support system, you don't know anybody, where your team becomes your life, etc. Anyway, always appreciate interaction on social media and on the text line at 877-353-0700. Very excited to welcome Sarah Todd back to the show post NBA draft lottery, post Mother's Day. Sarah Todd, how are you?
Doing great. How are you doing?
Well, I'm excited. I'm a little bit miffed because all of my NBA draft lottery conspiracies went up in smoke when the Utah Jazz got pick number 2, but I still am going to focus on the fact that the Jazz got pick number 2 in a deep draft where we think they can get a star player. But just take me inside the room and your thoughts when number 2 comes down with the Utah Jazz.
Yeah, it was, it's weird. I think there hasn't been like a ton of emotion that we've seen in the lottery drawing room since the Zion Williamson lottery. And I think if anybody remembers that, it's in the lottery room, in the drawing room itself. That was when Alvin Gentry got up and there was some flowery language and he jumped up and yelled and very excited when New Orleans was announced as getting the number 1 pick. But since then, it's been kind of very quiet, stoic reactions when people learn the fate of the top picks in the drawing room. And so when the number 1 pick was announced in the drawing room and it was Washington, again, incredibly stoic from Washington's president, Michael Winger. And then the number 2 was announced as Utah, and finally a little bit of emotion because Austin Ainge, he kind of gave a classic Tiger Woods like fist pump and he kind of just said yes. And you could tell that he was just absolutely overjoyed. And it was really, really nice to be in the drawing room and see somebody just display any type of emotion. That's how it's supposed to be, right? Like, I still can't believe, like, looking back on it, that there wasn't, hooping and hollering and jumping around when San Antonio got Wemby or when Dallas got number 1, knew they'd be getting Cooper. And so it's nice to see some excitement. And then I wrote last night, a lot of people don't know that the number combination for the number 2 pick came up, and it was Utah's number combination. They get announced that they get the number 2 pick. And then the next number combination that was drawn from the lottery machine was Utah again. And so it was like the basketball gods just punctuating the situation and being like, yeah, they do deserve a good one right now. And so obviously that number combination, the second one that was picked, that's discarded, and then they pick again, and the third pick goes to Memphis. But it was funny because Austin told me, yeah, I'll take number 2 and 3. That's fine. We can have them both.
I propose a rule that if your number combination comes up at 2 and 3, you put those together and it gets you 1 instead. But let's push that through for the NBA. All right. Okay, so now it sets us up with this really nifty soap opera for the next 5 or 6 weeks, where there's a decision-making process for the Washington Wizards, for the Utah Jazz, and part of that decision-making process, of course, is going to be who is the consensus number 1 for Washington, and are they willing to part ways with that pick, as some reports are suggesting right now, for the right price. And then if that's the case, the Utah Jazz would have to decide if it's worth paying that price. And that's what I started the show with today. Obviously, this gets a lot more convoluted because there is a backstory and a relationship between AJ DeBonsa, who's one of the top 2 players in this draft, and the Utah Jazz, or at least their ownership through the BYU situation. So tell me how you think this soap opera unfolds, or at least the process that you think the Utah Jazz have to go through before we get a solution on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that people need to realize is, Michael Winger, Austin Ainge, when they say things like, yeah, we're going to be willing to listen to offers for the pick, they can't say anything else, right? If a reporter asks them, like, oh, would you be, willing to trade down or listen to offers if someone came to you, they're not going to say, like, it's very unlikely that they're going to say, no, don't call us. We don't want to hear what you have to offer. That's just not how the NBA world works. Of course, they're going to listen. They want to hear if anybody's going to make a Godfather offer. They want to hear what people are willing to give up. And that is probably going to play out over the next few weeks. Like you said, like, there's going to be a soap opera. Are the Jazz willing to try and move up? Would they be willing to package that pick and move down for 2 picks. Like there's going to be tons of things that are tossed around and offered. Honestly, though, the most likely scenario is that the Wizards take the number 1 pick and that the Jazz take the number 2 pick. It's really, really hard for me to imagine a scenario where the Jazz feel like they have the number 2 pick. It's literally as good as it can get without being number 1. And it feels like it would kind of be a disappointment to then say, like, okay, we're actually going to pick number 5 and 8. Like, they've been trying so hard to get into the upper echelon of the lottery. That's all of the work over the last few years have been trying to get like a top 3 pick, and now they have it. So it's really hard for me to imagine that they would give that up. Now, trading up for number 1, I hear and I understand what everybody is saying about the relationship with AJ DeBonsa, but it's not like Darren Peterson, if that's who you have ranked number 2 on your draft board, is not a player that is projected at this point to be bad. Like, he has future multi-time All-Star. Like, both AJ and Darren Peterson look like they have the potential to be like maybe MVP type players. So I think that this is going to play out a little like soap operatic, like you said that it will. But really what is most likely to happen is that the Wizards are not going to disappoint their fans. They're going to take number 1, and the Jazz are probably not going to disappoint their fans. They're going to get an excellent player with the number 2 pick.
How big is the gap between Darren Peterson, AJ DeBonsa, and Cam Boozer, who in most evaluations seems to be number 3 in this draft?
Yeah, it's hard to, try and crystal ball and predict the future, but I think that, the way that it looks is that you have to imagine what we've seen over the last few years, kind of players of AJ DeBonsa or Darren Peterson's ilk, right? Like the sort of the rangy wing, the big wing with tons of athletic ability that AJ DeBonsa projects to have, like that is incredibly versatile in the NBA. It makes you someone that has a lot of upside on both sides of the floor. Darren Peterson being somebody that can, as a big lead guard, not being undersized and still having such a large amount of room to grow into the NBA. Again, tons of potential as a two-way player. I think that you just see a lot more upside from those positions and from like those skill sets than you do more of a traditional power forward big guy like Cam Boozer. And there's a lot of wondering, like Cam Boozer's success in college had a lot to do with how much bigger and stronger he looked compared to the competition. And in the NBA, that's not going to be as much of an advantage because everybody is bigger and stronger. And so he's going to kind of blend in a little bit more. And so I think that's where the biggest drop off is that you can still see so much potential for growth and a little bit more of potential for kind of fading into the background with Cam Boozer.
Sarah Todd is our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking about the exciting news that the Utah Jazz have come away from the NBA draft lottery with the number 2 overall pick. I'm going to be asking every basketball person this. Should you consider the likelihood of a player re-signing with your organization when you're talking about drafting up here in this top 3 area? Or should you just get what you can while you can from a player in the draft?
I think that when you're picking in the top 3 of the draft, the one thing that you should be thinking about is that you're taking the most talented player available on the board when you're picking. I don't think that you should really be thinking anything outside of that. One of the things that Austin Ainge mentioned to me last night in the drawing room is he's like, as they say, need is a bad evaluator, right? Like if you've got a top pick and you've got these incredibly talented potential like future MVP caliber rookies is what it seems like on the table, you should not be thinking like, well, what does our team need? And then pass over that kind of talent. What you should be thinking about is we are going to take the most talented player available, and then we will figure out everything else after that. And so I don't think that teams should be thinking about like, well, what do we think that this 18 or 19-year-old kid is going to think at the end of his, the end of the rookie scale contract when it comes to extension time? Like, do we think that he might be the kind of person once he gets into his 20s that he'll decide on something different? What an incredibly horrible way to try to figure out someone's mind. I mean, like, I don't even want to delve into getting into like the psyche of a teenager or an early 20s-year-old, because I know what I was like at that age. And so just take the best player available and hope that you can create a winning culture and success to the point that they want to stay. That I think that is the most important thing.
I agree with everything you've said so far. The most likely outcome here is that the Wizards draft at 1 and the Jazz draft at 2. It seems like the most likely scenario there, if that plays out, is that DeBonsa goes 1, Darren Peterson comes to the Jazz number 2. But bear with me here. How likely is it that there is some sort of, irrational ingredient to this process where your owner, and I don't want to put words into Ryan Smith's mouth, and I don't want to put thoughts into his head and make assumptions, but like where he says, no, my vision was to get AJ DeBonsa to my team, and we have a possibility of doing that, so go do that. It seems like this team, this franchise, has tried to do things in a reasonable and rational way, even the painful part of it, in the tanking and things like that. How likely is it that there is some irrational level that comes in and says, no, that's the guy I want. I already know him. I already like him. Go get him. Is it a possibility here?
I think listen, yes, anything is possible, right? But I think that it's more likely, like if you asked me, what are the teams in the NBA where you think they could really mess this up and kind of do something stupid on draft night? The Jazz are not one of the teams that I would list right off the top of my head. The Wizards might be. The Wizards might be one of the teams that I think, I don't really trust a lot of their decision-making lately. Or the Kings, if they had the number 1 pick, I'd be like, yeah, they're probably going to mess this one up. But I don't see the Jazz as kind of just digging in and trying to get the guy that was at BYU just because he was at BYU. I just don't think that is the kind of path that they're going to go down. I think that AJ DeBonsa was really, really great for the state of Utah, was really great for BYU, and that is going to continue to be a good story and successful for the state, even if he ends up at the Wizards. And would it be kind of like hometown hero stuff a little bit if he went to the Jazz? Sure. But I think that, if Darren Peterson comes to the Jazz, he'd become a hero, right? Like, I just think that there's so much good possibility with having the number 2 pick specifically in this draft that you don't really have to dig your heels in and try to get the guy that's, spent a couple of years here.
I appreciate your rational thinking, but it also is less interesting than being like, ooh, just swing for the fences just because.
I mean, like, here's my question, right? Like, do we think that let's take Ryan Smith out of the equation, right? Like, do we think that AJ DeBonsa loves Utah so much that he wants to be like, to have a team like try and pull all of the levers and make everything happen so that he can stay in Utah forever? Like, do we think that that's a part of the equation? Really?
I don't think so, but I mean, the NBA has incentivized players to stay with the place that drafts them, have they not? With, an extra year, max contracts, etc.
Yeah, there's definitely incentivization to stay where you're drafted, but I just don't think that there's this ultra pull that says like, well, because AJ was at prep and then at BYU for 1 year, that means that he can be like the savior of the state and that it's this massive, huge win if the Jazz get him. I think that might be overblown just a little bit. And like, I think AJ DeBonza wants to go number one and wants to be in the NBA. I don't really think that he probably cares too much where that is.
That's probably that. Number one is probably more important than where number one goes. I will agree with you on that one. How real is the concern about Darren Peterson's cramping issues and unexplained injury situations at Kansas? Even Bill Self's messaging on it changed pretty drastically throughout the year. There were some times where who's seen it all in college basketball, was like clearly incredibly frustrated with the situation, certainly, but even if you read between the lines, maybe a little bit with the player. And then as the season progressed, he definitely was a lot more favorable towards Darren and his evaluation of Darren and all that stuff. But every once in a while where there's a little smoke, there's a fire too. So how real a concern is all that stuff for the Utah Jazz?
Yeah, there's concern. I've been talking to people around the league about this for months, right? Like when it started to become an issue at Kansas, that's when I started asking people about it. And right from the very beginning, most NBA people would tell me like, yeah, it's a concern, but we want to see the medical information. We want to get him in front of NBA doctors. And as much as people respect and believe and know that even D1 athletes at some of the best schools have absolutely like top tier medical treatment available to them, that is true. But there is still a world of difference between what D1 athletes and NBA athletes are given when it comes to medical care treatment and just what's available to them. And so a lot of people within the NBA are like, yeah, let's hold off. Let's not get too worried about this until we actually like see from the NBA's perspective what's going on. So that's one component of it. The frustration and stuff, like it's hard. I can imagine a situation where, especially as, Bill Self and the entire Kansas organization is trying to kind of keep a lid on this and not let it out because, Darren and Darren's family probably don't want to let out the information about what's going on, right? Like if the cramping situation truly is all that was happening, and it is true that it was because of this creatine levels and that being a problem, like that actually being the reason for the cramping and it being mysterious up until recently, if that is all true, I can really, really understand a situation where he is having these cramps and going through these really scary episodes, including like being taken out on an ambulance and feeling like that he was going to die and not knowing what's going on in his body, his family being scared about that, Bill Self being scared about that, and then like intermittently, like it coming on suddenly and then going away and not knowing what's causing it. And then I'm certain that if that's the situation, there's also like doubt that creeps in. Like, is this real? Like, how can I expect to know like when this player is going to be available as a coach? Like, I don't know what's going on. Frustration, fear, all of that plays into a situation like this. And I can understand all of those emotions. And I can understand Bill Self being scared and being frustrated and having doubts about everything and wondering if that has anything to do about the character of the player. And so for this story to come out this week, it does feel like pretty timely, right before the lottery, a few weeks before the draft. But it doesn't make me think that it's not true. It doesn't make me think that any of the frustrations or fears of any of the people involved aren't as real as they absolutely should be. And so, like, I can understand and I can imagine a world where all of this is actually true and that everything is probably fine. But the important piece to cap all of that is NBA teams are looking forward to kind of like digging through the medical stuff and getting into a room and interviewing Darren without his family around, without his coaches around, without any cameras involved, and just talking to him and seeing what's what and kind of getting the lay of the land.
I look forward to whatever information we can get out of that too, because I'm unkind about this when we talk about elite high-level athletes, and he is a professional athlete. Like the University of Kansas basketball program is a professional team. If you're having these problems and you can't explain what they are, the first thing that people are going to look at is your diet and your supplementation. That is the first thing that's going to be evaluated. Like, hey, are you taking something new? Did you change your brands? For that to come out months later and just be like, oh yeah, it was this creatine. When, by the way, creatine doesn't cause cramping. Now, I fully allow for the fact that there's an allergy, or for the fact that there's a contamination, or the fact that a player, like a certain body, reacts differently than everyone else's body does. Like that's real. That happens. But I have a hard time with that explanation being the one that we are supposed to take at face value without further explanation. And if that is indeed what was happening, then Darren Peterson needs to sue Kansas because they were giving him the dang creatine. I don't know. That one's hard for me to swallow as someone who is very much in the athletics world and was very, very skeptical and careful about putting anything into my body that could lead to a positive drug test or lead to a negative outcome. I just have a hard time believing that it took that long to figure out that it was a supplement you can get on the shelf at Walmart. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. It also, like, I mean, if there's an 18-year-old kid who's just like, got like the powder in his, dorm, and he's going back after workouts and just like making a shake, and doing that in his room, and just like that's what everybody else is doing, and it's not something that he's actually getting like at the facility. If it, like, we're talking about something, and you just said it, right? Like, we all know that you can just go down to any store and get this stuff. And like, I am not a doctor. I don't know what it means when you have like naturally occurring high levels of creatine in your body already. And like, that's actually something that I'd really like to know more about, right? Like, what does it mean when somebody has that naturally high of occurring levels in their body? Should we be thinking about that and wondering about that down the line? But like, I can completely, I mean, I've been in situations where I've gone to the doctor and there's been something weird going on, and trying to narrow it down when you have something weird going on in your body takes so long, months. You can go in for so many different blood tests, like it's your first like comprehensive metabolic panel does not include looking at creatine levels. And so as doctors try and figure out something that's weird that's going on in your body, you go through and you get, 12 different blood tests, and well, none of those come up. And so a few weeks later you go in, you get 4 different blood tests, and nothing shows up on those. And a couple of weeks later, you go back and they run a couple more tests. Like that is normal stuff that happens when people are looking for something weird that's happening in your body. And so like, I can see a situation where a kid that's that young isn't saying like, oh yeah, my protein shakes that I just have after workouts. Like, I can imagine a situation where that just doesn't come up because it seems so normal and just so nonchalant that it's not something that he needs to bring up because it doesn't feel like it's something that would cause a problem. I hear you, though, that it's weird, and it is shocking that it took them so long to figure this out, and that it wasn't resolved during the season, and that that the story didn't come out earlier. All of it is strange, but I am allowing for a world in which it was all just kind of just slipped through the cracks. I can see that happening.
All right, before I let you go, and obviously we're going to try to have you on again as we approach the draft, and your answer can change when we get there, but it is the day after the draft lottery. We're May 11th in the year of our Lord, 2026. Your prediction for where and who the Utah Jazz draft in the end of June?
A Jazz draft number 2, Darren Peterson.
All right. I think that is the most likely outcome, but of course, the next several weeks we will talk about all the different possibilities. Sarah Todd, thank you for your time and your thoughts. I very much appreciate it, as always.
No problem. Talk soon.
At NBA Sarah, give her a follow. She is very reasonable about all these things. And that's why she's a big J journalist, like a real one. She doesn't just spout speculation into a microphone, which I do, and it's a lot of fun, ladies and gentlemen. Got to take another quick one here. Daily Dump is coming on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Look for the truck with the duck. They can handle it all: plumbing, heating, air conditioning. Go to valleyplumbing.com, make an appointment online. You don't even have to pick up the phone. They'll get out there most of the time, same day, at least the next day, and they'll take care of whatever your issue is quickly, concisely, and affordably. Excuse me. All right, lots to get to here on the Daily Dump today, brought to you by Valley Plumbing. Oh, James, I'm going to start with this one. RJ Day doesn't want to go to Ohio State. Ryan Day's son is going to Northwestern to play his college football. Your favorite team's head coach, not the family man you think he is, James. His son is going to a rival in the conference.
Yeah, rival in air quotes. Too bad. I think Ohio State's can be just fine though.
I think they'll be okay. So this actually fascinates me when you see some of this where like a lot of times, like Ryan Day is at one of the top 5 universities, university football programs in the country, right? And if his son wants to play there and is justified in, like, you're justified in recruiting like a Deion Sanders' son, right?
Yeah.
Like a Shedeur Sanders could have gone anywhere. And if his dad was the coach at Ohio State, it would have made sense for him to go play at Ohio State. It actually doesn't make sense at all for Ryan Day to recruit his own son to play quarterback for him, because if you're a quarterback at Ohio State, you're a top 5 player at that position in the country. At least you're supposed to be. So for RJ Day, Ryan Day Jr., the right thing is to go to a place that wants you and that you can actually play. And in the case of Northwestern, he has relationships with the coaches at that school because they worked for his dad. They know his dad. In the case of Chip Kelly, who's now at Northwestern, Ryan Day played for Chip Kelly. So this is actually like a really sneaky, cool fit for RJ Day to go play at Northwestern. So I was being facetious, obviously, in the way I approached it at the start, but like kind of cool where, dad gets to see his son go play for people he knows and trusts and doesn't have to deal with imagine telling your wife, if he wants to come play for me, he's got to be a walk-on because I can't justify giving him a scholarship at Ohio State.
Yeah, he's a 3-star. This is according to 24/7. He's a 3-star there, an 84 overall. Like that's not a bad evaluation for a quarterback coming out of college. 3-star quarterback ranked in the 80s overall. Pretty good, but it's not to Ohio State standard. And the fact that he still gets to play in the Big Ten, even though it is Northwestern, it's a program with a lot less fanfare, obviously. Like that's still, he should still feel pretty good about being a Big Ten quarterback for sure.
I would love if at some point we see Northwestern pull off like the mega upset with RJ Day quarterbacking against his dad's team. That'd be one of the coolest things ever.
Yeah, that would be something. And gets his dad fired. Oh no.
That probably would be bad.
That would be bad, but like
imagine Thanksgiving dinner a couple weeks later.
You had to beat us, son.
Hey Dad, sorry that I lost you your $12 million a year job by playing some good football against you. Sorry about that.
I can't believe you did that, son. I can't believe Lou Holtz would say that about us.
All right, we've been following this closely, and it's happening now. All right, let's go to the World Cup, ladies and gentlemen. Let's do the Sean O'Connell Show from the road. James, you can decide. You're the program director. Okay. You can decide whether we're doing it at Levi Stadium, whether we're doing it at SoFi, whether you want to go down to Houston or whatever. But World Cup ticket prices are now falling below face value. We've done it, ladies and gentlemen. We're sticking it to FIFA because they were price gouging, hotels price gouging, rental cars price gouging, transportation companies price gouging, and the American sports fan has finally declared that enough is enough. We are not paying these prices on the official secondary market for FIFA, on the other secondary ticket pricing websites, the exorbitant fees are now coming back down to either face value or, in the case of 50% of tickets, now below face value to attend World Cup games, including USA Panama, which is their debut at SoFi. You can now get the tier 3 tickets, like the upper tickets. You can now get those below face value. So we're somehow finding a way to stick it to FIFA. They're still going to be the most powerful organization in all of sport. They're still going to be making billions upon billions of dollars off of this whole thing. They're still taking 15% of the resale price, even if it is below face value. So they're getting their second bite at the apple. But from a consumer perspective, the message is being sent that, hey, guys, we can't do this. And we're still a month away. So by the time we get there, if the prices continue to fall, maybe we're talking mega discount, half price. Who knows? James, we're going to the World Cup.
We're going. What? So as far as falling, what are we looking at now for that USA Panama match? What's the get in number? I know you've looked this up, right?
Yeah, it's now under $1,000. It's like $980.
And then for random, like non-USA match, not like star-studded match, it's. What was that, like 300 still?
Yeah, so you can get Iran Switzerland tickets for like $200, and guess what? There's
wow.
more tickets have been sold to that game, which is also at SoFi. More tickets have been sold to that game than to the USA Panama game.
Wow.
So I think there's a lot of people who just want to go and say they went to a World Cup soccer game, and according to the FIFA count, it's like there's like 50+ thousand that have been sold to that one, mid 40,000s for USA versus Panama. So the demand is really becoming a question and a problem for FIFA, which I think will hopefully motivate a further drop in prices. I promise you can drop them significantly and still be profitable, FIFA.
Yeah, seriously, $200 to get in is approaching the price that even I might spend the money to go out of town to watch one of these games, because that's not bad.
You couldn't watch a mammoth playoff game for less than that, basically.
No.
So now we're talking about like these are. I'm not. The World Cup itself is something I absolutely want to attend. I have no problem with the World Cup. I have a problem with FIFA trying to screw everyone who is trying to attend a World Cup, and the collective pushback from the wallets of consumers, I think, is making it hopefully a little bit easier on fans everywhere. So we shall see. I'm going to keep a close eye because we're a month away from the first matches being played.
We're going to get a remote sold to right outside SoFi or Levi's. So we're going to make it happen.
You know how amazing that would be if we
so great.
Right, if we're right out there on like the plaza and random Swiss soccer fans are walking up and they're just like, what's this? It's like, oh, we're a radio station in Salt Lake City, Utah.
They're like, was ist das?
Yeah, they're like, why are you here? Don't worry about it. Just give me some chocolate and go into the game.
Toblerone, please, and leave.
Is Toblerone Swiss?
I believe it is.
I thought that was French. That shows you how much I know. All right. Steve Kerr. Remember there was all this like speculation, the end of an era in Golden State, Steve Kerr maybe moving on, Draymond and Steph, like they all kind of had their little hug, like, guys, it's been the best. Steve Kerr ain't going anywhere. He agreed to a 2-year extension with the Warriors. That was on Sunday. That was actually right before the NBA draft lottery. That got the conspiracy theorists fired up, like, oh my gosh, the Warriors are going to win it now.
Are they going to get the number 1 pick now? Yeah.
Steve Kerr only agreed to come back because he was going to get the number 1 pick. No, didn't happen. But Steve Kerr is staying in San Francisco and remaining head coach of the Golden State Warriors. Makes perfect sense. Their championship window is closed. The dynasty is over, but no reason to push Steve Kerr out the door. He's still a good coach. He still has a good rapport with the young players on that team, not just with Steph. I like Steve Kerr, so I'm glad he's staying.
Yeah, me too. And I think he wants to be tied to Steph at least till, like, he wants to remain the coach of the Warriors at least until Steph retires or is no longer a member of the Warriors, right? And hopefully that is when Steph is no longer a member of the Warriors. We don't have a weird traded somewhere else situation with him, or free agent somewhere else situation with him. He's a forever Warrior. That seems to be the thing that makes the most sense to me. Whether they have a chance of winning a title or not, he wants to coach Steph until Steph is done playing. Maybe that's 2 years from now.
The Milwaukee Bucks, are seeking trade offers for Giannis, according to Shams Charania. They're open for business, and apparently they have said, you know what, we want a nice little rebuild package if you're going to get Giannis. Scratch out everything I said about the Utah Jazz, who they're going to pick at number 2, trade the pick to Milwaukee, bring in Giannis, boom, problem solved.
That is the other sound move to make with this number 2 pick, OC. Don't trade for number 1. Get the Bucks on the hook for this kind of move. Let them have Darren Peterson or Cam Boozer, whoever they want, with that number 2 pick. We'll take Giannis.
Let's go.
We'll have the biggest starting lineup in the history of mankind.
Greek Freak in Salt Lake City.
Giannis is the point guard. Let's go.
That's what I'm saying. Why not? Eat your heart out, Magic Johnson. We got a guy who's even taller than you running the point.
Blue chip talent and or a surplus of draft picks is what Shams is reporting. That was reportedly their asking price at this past trade deadline. At this point, they're like, we see no reason to deviate from that, which I think I absolutely agree with that thought.
I give you the number 2 pick and Cody Williams. Who says no? Let's go, Bucks. Come on. Come on. Send Giannis our way. You know what I bet he's never had, even though he's the Greek Freak? I bet he's never had a baklava milkshake. You can get those here in Salt Lake City. I will personally deliver him one if the Jazz make that trade. Austin Ainge, I know you're listening. That's the move.
I know you will. There's a surprising number of Greek, like fast casual or fast food places around here. I bet he doesn't know that. I bet he doesn't know that he would feel right at home in Greektown, and also not just in Greektown, many other places in the Valley, with the amount of like Greek themed restaurants we have around here.
The Greek festival is basically around the corner from arena every summer. I mean, come on, Giannis.
That's right, Austin. Bring him out in September, early September, for the Greek festival. He will be convinced he wants to be here.
Okay, we solved your problems. You don't have to worry about who you're going to draft because you use the draft pick on Giannis Antetokounmpo, and everyone's happy. All right, and now I'm hired to be team president and or general manager of the Utah Jazz because of my great ideas. All right, I got to be serious about this one here for a second, though. The Minnesota Vikings are inducting Adrian Peterson into their Ring of Honor this coming season. He also becomes eligible for the Hall of Fame next year. Adrian Peterson is still among the top 3 college football players I have ever seen play. He carried that dominance into the NFL. I have a complicated relationship with how much I want to see this guy honored in his post-career. Adrian Peterson spent a lot of his time and money sponsoring and representing the Special Olympics, which are a wonderful, wonderful organization and cause that is near and dear to my heart. I have a younger brother who has been a gold medalist many times over in the Special Olympics. It is the most wholesome, incredible thing to see people with special needs of all ability levels, all levels of handicap, allowed to compete in the sports that we all love. And it really is wonderful. And so I applaud Adrian Peterson outside, obviously, everything he was able to do in football for that. I weirdly felt bad for Adrian Peterson when he ended up 9 yards shy of the all-time single season rushing record, and they wouldn't just let him go try to get it. I thought that was kind of messed up. But I got kids, man, and even though I believe that you don't have to coddle your kids and I'm not exactly what you would call a soft parent. Like Adrian Peterson was investigated and seriously targeted and found guilty of like child abuse, like serious stuff. and putting him in a Ring of Honor and decorating him as somebody to look up to is complicated. I know that nobody is perfect. I know that nobody is a perfect parent. I know that how you raise your kids is often a reflection of how you were raised. And he made that case like, look, I got hit with a switch and I'm fine. And by all accounts, his son is also fine. The son that he actually got in trouble for hitting with the switch and bruising with the switch is now a high-level recruit. Just got an offer from the University of Miami. He's only 14 years old. He's already 6'1" and 180 pounds. Like, he might be better than his dad. We'll see. But, man, that's a tough one for me because, I mean, I don't know how all of you out there feel about spanking. I got spanked. I'm fine. That level of, like, you shouldn't be leaving markings on your kids, man. And Adrian Peterson did. And I just don't know that. I know that people have been decorated for their sports careers completely independent of how they were off the field. And there's been domestic abusers that have jerseys retired, and there's been probably abusive fathers that have had jerseys retired. The stuff that is not requisite, like, by all means, tell him he's a great football player, but the Ring of Honor is for honorable people. I'll leave it at that. That's your daily dump here on the Sean O'Connell Show. We'll take a quick one here, one final thought, and then we'll get to Nick Olczyk at the top of hour number 3. Don't go anywhere. It's Utah's number one sports talk, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. All right, we've been talking about the future of the NBA, especially with the Utah Jazz after the draft lottery. Jazz picking number 2 at the end of June. We'll be speculating on what that looks like for the next several weeks, but NBA playoffs are happening right now. And Victor Wembanyama, we saw a different side of him. He got into it with Naz Reid, threw a little elbow at Naz Reid, got ejected from Game 4. That series is now tied up at 2 apiece. And there was some question as to whether or not Victor Wembanyama would face further discipline from the league. He is too important to the league and to their ratings. So he will play Game 5 against the Timberwolves in San Antonio, according to Shams Charania. So Wemby is, again, like, he doesn't have a history of bad behavior. That's obviously going to help you out in a situation like this one. But pretty serious elbow, obviously very serious infraction, a flagrant 2 for excessive contact above the neck, which comes with an automatic suspension, an automatic ejection, and then triggers an evaluation for further discipline. He is not going to be penalized for Game 5, and he missed most of Game 4 because of this. There was halfway through the second quarter. It is the earliest an all-star has been tossed from a playoff game since 1997-1998, according to ESPN research. Those teams have now gone 1-8 when an all-star is ejected from a playoff game before the fourth quarter. 97-98, was that a Karl Malone ejection? Something tells me that might have been a Karl Malone ejection.
I was just going to say the same thing. I have not been able to find what it is. I haven't spent a lot of time tracking that down, but that he did go full Karl Malone on Naz Reid, like the elbow, except Malone did like elbows to the temple. Wemby went straight at Naz's neck there, so that was definitely mailman style.
So, okay, until we get confirmation, 97-98, who are the other? Dennis Rodman was a playoff. He was an all-star caliber player in that era. I don't know if he was an all-star in 97-98.
Yeah, I wonder if this stat is like, it's probably an all-star that particular season that they were also ejected.
Gotta be, right?
Guess, right? Not just happened to be an all-star at a different time in their career.
Okay, I'm going to look up the 1997-1998 all-star rosters. Let's see here. Okay, who could it have been before we get any kind of confirmation? 877-353-0700, by the way, if you know who it was. The Eastern Conference All-Stars in 1998. Sean Kemp. Could have been him.
That's a strong candidate there.
Grant Hill, no. Dikembe Mutombo, he's not getting ejected. Michael Jordan, Penny Hardaway, Tim Hardaway, Jason Williams, Rick Smits, Reggie Miller, Glenn Rice, Steve Smith, and Antoine Walker. Okay, so the Eastern Conference All-Stars, the most likely is Sean Kemp. Second most likely, Antoine Walker.
Yeah, yep, you've read my mind. I feel like there's 3 strong candidates there from the East: Kemp, Walker, and Glenn Rice.
Okay, the Western Conference All-Stars, you've got some good options here, okay? Karl Malone, Kevin Garnett, Shaquille O'Neal.
Yeah, check.
Kobe Bryant, probably not.
He was second-year player that year. Didn't really get ejected. Yeah, probably even later. Probably not. Yeah.
Gary Payton.
Yeah.
Vin Baker.
Yeah, absolutely.
Eddie Jones. David Robinson, Mitch Richmond, Jason Kidd, Tim Duncan, and Nick Van Exel. So there's like six guys on the Western Conference All-Stars that could have been the offending player who got ejected. We got to figure out who this was.
Let me narrow it down just a titch more from the East. It could not have been Antoine Walker because he played for the Celtics, and the Celtics did not make the playoffs. That season. They didn't make the playoffs in Antoine Walker's tenure there until like 4 years later. They had a rough 90s. So It was not Antoine Walker.
All right.
And off the top of my head, I'm not sure how many of those from the West were on non-playoff teams. I think most of them were.
I mean, okay, so the Jazz were a playoff team.
Yeah.
Was that version of Minnesota with Kevin Garnett? Were they in the playoffs?
They were a playoff team.
Okay, the Lakers obviously were. Gary Payton and Vin Baker were both on Seattle that year.
They were in the playoffs.
And Nick Van Exel was a Laker. So
yeah, that was a playoff team. Let's see. I think one of the only all-stars from the West that were not on playoff teams might have been Mitch Richmond and the Kings. Or unless he was Western Conference, he would have been with the Kings at that time. Yeah.
While I'm here on the rookies game here, Eastern Conference rookies playing in that game in 97-98. Keith Van Horn, shout out to the former U.
All right.
Zydrunas Ilgauskas, Ron
Big
Mercer,
Z.
Chauncey. Yeah, Ron Mercer, Chauncey Billups, Tracy McGrady all ended up having some pretty healthy careers. The Western Conference rookie game, listen to these guys. Roderick Rhodes, Maurice Taylor, Michael Stewart, Bobby Jackson, Antonio Daniels, Kelvin Cato, Danny Forston, and Alvin Williams. Yikes.
Not great, Bob. Couple of those guys were at least rotation players on some playoff teams, but most of those you probably have never heard of. The Eastern Conference, that's a strong field, though.
Yeah, Eastern Conference was awesome. Western Conference, not so much. 3-point shootout won that year by
Jeff Hornacek.
Correct.
Shout out.
That a baby, Horny.
He won.
All right,
he won 2 in a row because he won. They didn't have an All-Star game the next year because of strike shortened year. Then he won in 2000, I believe. So
you love to see it. All right. We got to take a break here. We'll jump off the basketball train a little bit. Nick Olczyk from the Utah Mammoth broadcast and the Sports USA NHL analyst. He's going to join us next. We'll talk about the moves to make this offseason for the Mammoth and the ongoing Stanley Cup playoffs, if there's any surprises for him there. Nick Olczyk next on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Well, welcome back to the Sean O'Connell Show. Welcome in Nick Olczyk from the Utah Mammoth and the Sports USA NHL broadcast. Nick, welcome back to the show. How are you, sir?
John, great to be back on with you. It's a very exciting time of the year with the playoffs going on and how tight some of these series are, and obviously an unforgettable and memorable and exciting season for the Utah Mammoth. Unfortunately, not able to move past the first round, but found a way to win 2 games and gain a lot of experience, and it was just so great to see Mammoth Nation all over the nation, all around the world, and the great state of Utah really get behind their team as they had done all year. But as the Stanley Cup playoffs continue on, the series are tight, and hopefully everybody's been enjoying and taking in all of the games so far.
I definitely want to get to the ongoing series here, but I want to start with the Utah Mammoth. And I mean, obviously, you're so incredibly close to it, and you've had the experience all year long, and even last year, the first year of the franchise moving to the state of Utah. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know here, Nick, but I grew up here. I moved here in 3rd grade from Minnesota. I grew up here. Hockey was not a thing when I was a young kid in the state of Utah. College football wasn't even as huge of a deal in the state of Utah when I was young, and obviously that has changed pretty drastically in the last couple of decades. And I think the best equivalent I can find to what we have seen here with the Utah Mammoth in their first 2 years is when that shift started to happen for college football in our state, when Utah went on an undefeated run in 2004 under Urban Meyer and became the BCS Busters, and everyone wrapped their arms around college football, and BYU was really good at the time, and that rivalry really started to get even more intense. I remember in those days, I was a lot younger then, thinking, wow, this is something different in our state. I have not felt it. It hasn't sounded like this. It hasn't looked like this. I was at the very first Utah Mammoth game. I was at the first Utah Mammoth playoff game, and it really is. And I know we've kind of talked about this before, but it really is something that our state has never seen, and people are biting down on this thing. They're embracing it, and they're caring about it even now into an off season. I've talked to a lot of people who they didn't just like put the Mammoth sweaters away. There's a curiosity about, hey, is this team going to be as good next year? Are they going to be better next year? What's this offseason going to look like? And for me, that is a really strong indication of the staying power of the Utah Mammoth and of the NHL and of hockey in our state. Because, of course, you can cheer for it. You can be interested in it when it's right there in front of you. But now we have to wait, and people are waiting with eager anticipation and with great curiosity and interest. So I guess my question is, what moves do need to be made this offseason to build on the momentum that we saw?
Well, Sean, I thought that was really well put by you. There's obviously a lot there. We could probably use the whole segment to talk about the impact of the Mammoth here. But before I delve into the off season, I cannot go any further without giving the well-deserved praise and admiration of our fans. I mean, this is me being honest. I'm not trying to pander at all, but I mean, I had high expectations because I saw from day one the interest and how it's grown here in the state of Utah in hockey, in the National Hockey League, and of course the Mammoth. But just to see that explode exponentially come playoff time, to me, I mean, it was mind blowing, and I knew it was going to grow because with success comes more support, more interest, as you had laid out with football in this state back in the early 2000s. And when you win, people are more interested. When you win, there's more money. When you win, there's more support. There's more rivalries. There's more everything. And so, you know, I thought for as exciting as the run was, and as great as the guys played out on the ice, I mean, I thought our fans, they not only showed up as team governor and owner Ryan Smith and his wife Ashley always love to say, and which is exactly what Utah does on a daily basis to all of the causes and teams that they support, is that our fans showed up and they showed out, and they were there 4 or 5 hours before the home games at the plaza party out front of the Delta Center, the watch parties at the Delta Center when the games were on the road in Vegas, and And that really gave a whole other boost to the guys. I mean, I thought our in-arena entertainment and our in-arena crew did an incredible job of putting on a spectacle and a show, of hyping things up to the next level. And, of course, the guys out on the ice went out and did their thing, and they found a way to beat a Stanley Cup contending team twice in that series. And, yeah, of course, ended up losing in 6 games. But, you know, when I look ahead to the off season, you know, yes, there's going to be some movement. No team, or I should say, very rarely an anomaly would be where a team stays completely together. There's going to be some unrestricted free agents, and we'll see what happens with those guys. Players like Alexander Kerfoot, who was really important to Utah's penalty kill at some crucial times this season. You know, other questions, what's going to happen to Ian Cole, an unbelievable veteran defenseman who's won 2 Stanley Cups, and I thought he played a real important role this year, not just on the ice blocking shots and hitting everything that moves, and also being another fixture on the penalty kill, but being a leader in the room and on the bench when the young team, that is the Utah Mammoth overall, face some adversity. You got to have guys like that. You know, what's going to happen to a Nick DeSimone, who I thought came in at times and filled an important role. And there was a stretch where, you know, he sat out for 7, 8, 9 games and came in because of an injury, and he played so good you just couldn't take him out. And I think he ended up playing 12 or 13 straight games. So, you know, there's going to be some question marks about players that are they going to be re-signed? How about a restricted free agent in Barrett Hayton? And, you know, is he going to be here long term? So, you know, there are some questions. There are some moves that are going to need to be made, whether it's players either being chose not to re-sign, or going out and making a trade, or looking at free agency, and we'll see how things play out. But you know, when you look at the core of this roster, Sean, the core is good. They're getting better, and they're going to be good for a long time, considering you've got Dylan Guenther and Logan Cooley for the next 7 and 8 years. You've got Clayton Keller, who is in my eyes just entering his prime for a guy that's going to be able to get you 80 to 90 points, and of course be the captain of the team. And Lawson Crouse, I mean, what a year for him. And I don't think we should underestimate the year that Lawson Crouse had. An immense bounce back season. And there's a reason why he wears the A for the associate captain on this club, because of what he brings on the bench and on the ice too. So overall, yes, I would expect some movement. You know, does Bill Armstrong maybe go out and try to get a little bit of size in the top 6? You know, we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. You know, where does he look to add? But also, you know, Sean, we can't go any further without talking. How about some of these young guys that are on the cusp? And I'm talking about the guys that aren't even a part of the Utah Mammoth. When you think about TJ Ginla, you think about Cole Baudouin, Dmitry Simishev, who we saw at times this year. Maverick Lamoureux, is he really ready to take the next step? So, you know, some of the guys that aren't even on the Mammoth roster right now, some of the guys that are still in junior, you know, we'll see how those guys push and see if they can try to make a name for themselves here at development camp, and then of course main camp in the middle of September. But there's no doubt exciting year last year, and the future is pretty blindingly bright for the National Hockey League team here in Utah.
As we talk about, and it is all guesswork for us right now. Well, for me it is. You probably have better insight, but you know, there's a sort of cultural philosophy that takes shape with every team, and it's fluid, and you can adjust it. I wonder how much leadership or veteran age you need on this team, because there's a lot of young talent, right? And that's a good thing for very obvious reasons. Some of the playoff teams that are still active right now are certainly, they're older at their core, and they're older on average than this Utah Mammoth team is. And part of that is, you know, like some of them are reaching the end of their windows, and the Mammoth are just now starting to open theirs. But if you are thinking of bringing somebody in, even if it's not the top 6, even if it's not, you know, a first or second line type individual, how much value would there be for the Utah Mammoth in going out and finding someone who is older, more experienced, has been through the Stanley Cup playoffs a bunch of times? Because they have that on the roster already, with some guys that are kind of young to mid-young. There's not like the obvious core of elder statesmen that are able to bring up the young pups, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So is that something that they could add, or is that a wasted effort when it's better to let these guys maybe grow together?
Yeah, I mean, look, you've got some guys that have been around and have played in the playoffs and won a Stanley Cup. I mean, I look at a guy like Kevin Stenlund, who's he's 29 years old, but he won the Stanley Cup with the Florida Panthers, and a guy that knows what it takes to win at that time of the season. So while he may not be older in terms of mid to late 30s, like an Ian Cole. That is a guy I think that would fit that bracket that you're talking about there, Sean, and the kind of guy who is super crucial to this team because I really don't think that there's a better fourth line center in the entire National Hockey League, and that's going to be another guy who is going to be looking for a new contract. He's an unrestricted free agent once this season ended. So you look at guys like that. You look at Nate Schmidt, who's still under contract. He'll be here for the next couple of years, 2 more years once this season ended. And these are the types of guys that I think it is so important to have good veterans on your team, not just because they know what it takes and they can lead and they can help themselves go through those processes, but to help the younger guys. And it's not like hey, let me show you how to do it. Sometimes it's having a calming presence on the bench. When you go through some adversity during a game in the playoffs and things go a little bit haywire, and as a young guy, you look to your left, you look to your right, and you see 2 guys that have grizzled beards. There might be a little gray in there, and they're just sitting there calm because it's not something that they haven't seen before. It's not something they haven't experienced before. So it's those things. It's also helping the players during the season. But I think another crucial part, to kind of go a little bit inside the game here is during those important moments during a playoff game, a playoff series. Playoffs is so much tighter. The rink shrinks, so much less time, so much less space, a lot more physicality. For example, if there's a guy that's facing a situation where he's skating into the offensive zone and he really doesn't have much support with him, and he's got 2 or 3 defenders in front of him, during the regular season, okay, maybe you try to beat a guy and then beat the second guy. In the playoffs, you don't beat that first guy, you're not going to get through the second or the third layer. So that's where it comes to decision making of just, okay, I don't have support with me. I'm just going to chip the puck deep, going to kill the clock, try to get in on the forecheck and wait for my teammates to at least give them a chance to try to come out. Because if you turn it over there at the blue line offensively, there's usually going to be an odd-man rush, a fast break the other way. So to me, it's making smart plays like that because you've been in this situation, and that's where I think veteran leadership, both in the forward group as well as the D-corps, that's why I think it is so crucial to have those guys around. Because, yes, of course, they're going to help behind the scenes. They're going to remain calm and kind of talk some guys through things on the bench during the heightened adversity of a playoff series, but also to make those simple but very crucial plays at crucial moments. I think that's a real difference maker. And so we'll see. Bill Armstrong had a very veteran-laden back end last year. We've already mentioned a couple of the guys, and we'll see how that transforms with a couple of young pups who we talked about earlier who are very much on the cusp of wanting to break into this roster.
Nick Olczyk, our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, recapping some things with the Utah Mammoth, whose season, of course, is over as the Stanley Cup playoffs continue. Of those young pups, and you did throw some names out there, and there's maybe a couple more in the pipeline, who do you think is most likely to emerge as an everyday staple next season?
Boy, oh boy, I think the name that comes to mind, I'll give you a forward and I'll give you a defenseman. The defenseman, I'm waiting for Dmitry Simashev to really take that next step. He's got all the tools. He's 6'4". He can really skate. There's offensive instinct there. Is it 50 to 60 points a season type of offensive instinct? I'm not sure if maybe it's that much, but he is the kind of guy that is going to be able to make some things happen on the offensive side of the game. And he proved for stretches this year that he's on the cusp. But to do it for 5 games in a row,
and then to do it for 50 games in a row there, Sean, that's the big difference of being an everyday, every game National Hockey League player. And the only way he's going to gain that experience is, of course, to play. But I give him a lot of credit, is that when he was sent down to the American Hockey League after playing almost 20 games and when he broke camp with the team last year, the points weren't there. The consistency, I thought, dropped a little bit as that segment of games had gone on. Once he got to that 12 to 19 game mark, I thought the pace of play dropped a bit from him. So he went down to the American Hockey League in Tucson, and I thought it was the right decision because there he's not going to be playing third pairing minutes where he's playing 12 to 14 minutes a night, like at times he was in the NHL. Down there in the American Hockey League, he is a big fish in a small pond. I mean, he's the top pair guy. He's playing power play, he's playing penalty kill, and he ended up being an American League All-Star and went to the All-Star game to represent the Tucson Roadrunners and was playing in every situation. So I think it's just like anything in life. You want to get better at anything, you got to do it a lot. You got to get your reps. You got to be put in high-pressure situations, and you got to have your limits really tested. And so I give him a lot of credit. I think the organization handled that perfectly, knowing that, when you're on the cusp, you want to play in the NHL. Of course, there's no question about it. There's no doubt. But I thought the mindset and the attitude that he showed going down there was no pouting. There was no, poopy pants, so to speak. He went down there and he performed well and he put up points and played in every situation for Tucson. So I think that's another guy that's going to come to camp ready to go. And I think to look at a forward, TJ Ginla really impressed me last year, Sean. He's finally back and healthy. It was about a year ago. He was dealing with some lower body injuries. He had to have some procedures, and he had a heck of a year this past season for Kelowna in the Western Hockey League up in the CHL. And when I watch him in camp, he is assertive. That to me is the word that really comes to mind describing TJ Ginla. There's not a lot of perimeter with his game. Is he 6'5"? No, but he sure plays like it. He's not at all afraid to engage in the physical battle. He wants the puck on his stick. He wants to battle, and if he's going into a corner against another guy, he's either coming out with the puck or the other guy's leaving with a bruise, and he's got the puck. So it's just, I think he is right there. We'll see how he can manage at camp, but the type of guy that is a real difference maker, both with his feet, with his brain, and all you need to do is type in TJ Ginla on YouTube and just watch some of those goals he scores. That's a twisted wrister that he possesses, so it'd be really exciting to see those two guys, among others, that should make a real push to make the opening day roster at camp coming up next season.
I want to stay with those two in particular for a minute because, there's always a leap when you're climbing a level. For the guys you just mentioned, is it more getting physically ready, physically mature, or is it a mental capacity of the game? Because they're not on the same they're not on the same level when it comes to their own like individual physical size, but the difference in how they play, the difference in position, etc. Is it a physicality readiness or is it a mentality readiness that you need to see these guys achieve?
I think it's both, Sean. I really do. I mean, you could make a case that it's both. In terms of the mental part of the game, I mean, I think that goes hand in hand with the physical part of the game. And the one word that comes to mind for me, it's like, okay, well, what makes Clayton Keller the great player that he is? Well, that you're going to get 80 or 90 points out of him every regular season. Like, he's consistent in that way. He knows what it takes every single game to do something, and no two games are going to be the same. Sometimes the puck isn't bouncing your way, so you got to adjust. Sometimes the opposition is taking away a certain play that you want. Okay, well, how can you adapt? How can you adjust? And for young players, the toughest thing to do is to be as consistent as you can, but also make these subtle little adaptations and adjustments throughout the course of a game and a season. So for both of those guys, I think it goes hand in hand. And look, I mean, there's a tremendous training staff with the Utah Mammoth, of course, down in the American League as well, that are going to make sure that these guys are doing all the things that they need to do to keep their bodies and their minds in the best place possible. But for a young guy trying to break into the NHL. There's going to be spurts where you show a lot of promise and things are going your way. But to me, it's how you handle the downtimes. It's how you handle the adversity that's bound to come your way at some point. So, I think it's both. But for those guys in particular, they have very unique skill sets in that they were dominant at levels growing up when they were teenagers. And now when, again, let's still a teenager and Dmitry Simashev breaking into his young 20s, these are guys that I think do have the right mindset. They want to play in the NHL. They want to be difference makers with the Utah Mammoth, but it is a process. It's going to take time. There is a development, path that these guys are on. And if there's one thing that we've seen throughout the years with the likes of Dylan Gunther and company, is that Bill Armstrong, his development staff, his scouting staff, they're not going to rush these guys along. They're not just going to plug them into the Mammoth just because it'll be a headline for a week. They want to make sure that when these guys come, is that they're going to be ready and that they're going to be able to play on a consistent basis. And so I think that to the heart of your question, is it more mental? Is it more physical? I really think it is the ultimate blend of both, of being able to prepare your body, prepare your mind every day, knowing that you're playing in the greatest league in the world, yes, but also knowing that there's some pretty darn good players on the other team as well that are looking to shut you down. And I've always thought that it's tougher for a defenseman to break into the NHL just because of the level of talent now, and it's at an all-time high. And so we'll see how things play out, but if I'm a Utah Mammoth fan and I'm part of Mammoth Nation, those are two guys, along with a few others. Caleb Denoyer, another. Cole Baudouin is another. Maverick Lamoureux, a guy that we've seen a little bit here the last couple of years. Those are some pretty important guys moving forward, and so it's safe to say that the Mammoth are in good hands for years to come.
We watched the NHL draft lottery play out last week, and Toronto gets picked number 1. San Jose, who I'm already hearing their footsteps. San Jose gets picked number 2, 4th year in a row. They're drafting in the top 4. How bothered by that should I be? Because they do well with their draft picks.
Yeah, I mean, look, Sean, I don't know if I'd say bothered. Look, teams that are on the cusp, that I think you mentioned it perfectly, that you're hearing footsteps, and you should, because the San Jose Sharks, I think, have done an awesome job the last couple of years of picking the right players. And look, they've got a generational talent in Macklin Celebrini, who very well could be the next Sidney Crosby. I mean, for how he performed at the Olympics, for the season that he had with the San Jose Sharks, all year he was my Hart Trophy nominee. Even if the Sharks didn't make the playoffs, which they didn't, they weren't even within a window of or a lick of being close without the performance that he had. A boatload more points than the guy who finished in second, and Will Smith, and that's a young team. They hope that they found their goaltender of the future. They've got a really solid young D-core as well with some offensive upside, and Sam Dickinson, who's a stud on the back end. And then you look at the forward group, with Celebrini and Will Smith, and you can go on down the line. That's going to be a scary team for years to come, and they just didn't quite have it towards the end of the year to be able to break in. But hey, they got the bounce, they got the lottery pick. They're going to be picking second, and finally, you mentioned the Toronto Maple Leafs. Some good news up there in Leafland. Not only bringing in Matt Sundin to help run the show there in Toronto, also bringing in John Chaika as well as their general manager. They're hoping that their future can turn around. But anytime you start with a number 1 overall pick, that's a good thing for the organization, and finally some positivity to talk about for the Toronto Maple Leafs, considering it was a pretty rough year for them on the ice, and of course in the hotbed of hockey media that is the mecca of the city of Toronto. So we'll see how things play out there. But for the San Jose Sharks, that's a young team, an exciting team with some really amazing building pieces for a long time to come.
Now that you're a fully adopted Utahn, are you pumped about the Utah Jazz picking number 2 in the upcoming NBA draft lottery?
I think it's great. I think it's a long time coming. In terms of the unfortunate luck last year in the lottery, I'm still learning basketball, Sean. I grew up hockey, was my life. Baseball is my summer sport. I pay attention to soccer as well, but I'm still trying to learn the ropes of basketball. But I know that 2 is better than 3, and 2 is better than 4, and all the way down the line. So I'm hoping that they can draft a real difference maker, and someone that's going to be able to help them win. Because I've talked to some people. I don't know if this is informed or uninformed. But it seems like there's a lot of reason and a lot of cause for excitement next year for the Utah Jazz, and hopefully they can bring in a young stud at number 2 to complement the likes of Lauri Markkanen and Keontae George. The future seems bright there as well, and so hopefully they can get someone that can be a difference maker at number 2.
Listen to that, Nick Olczyk. You in a pinch, he could be doing some Jazz talk for us, but we'll lean on you for the Utah Mammoth. Again, thanks for joining us today. You guys have done an incredible job all year long, and you're helping us learn hockey, I think, at a lot faster rate than any of us would be able to without you. So thanks for your time again, Nick. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Always a pleasure being on with you, and I know I speak for myself and our entire broadcast team that we just want to say thank you to all of our incredible fans who tuned in. And at the end of the day, we're here to do 2 things, and that's inform and entertain, because there's a lot of reasons why people tune in to watch the Utah Mammoth. You might be having a bad day. You might love hockey. You might love Clayton Keller. You might just be bored on a Friday night at home, and we're here for you. So thank you for the time, for the kind words, and looking forward to enjoying a great summer and being back at it in September.
Great stuff, as always, from Nick Olczyk. You can catch him on the Utah Mammoth broadcast, Little Sports USA, as well with the NHL. Playoffs continue in the NHL. I still haven't seen anything that makes me believe anyone's going to be able to knock off Colorado, although Minnesota was able to claw one away from them in that series. First time that Colorado has lost in this postseason. Comes in the second round to the Minnesota Wild. So, man, let's jump back into the NBA discussion. If you're just tuning in, we spent the first couple hours of the show talking about the Utah Jazz with the good news this weekend. NBA draft lottery. They will pick number 2. But what does it actually look like? What does it actually mean? We'll start to build the case that will be built for the next 5 or 6 weeks on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Pushing toward the end here of the Sean O'Connell Show, we're going to give away a free round of Golf to El Monte, courtesy of the Festival of Teas, brought to you by the Utah Golf Association and brought to you by Mountain Home Services. Every day here on the Sean O'Connell Show and on the Drive with Spence Checketts. We'll do that here in a bit. James, did you figure out who the ejected player was? The ejected all-star player was in 2000. In the 1997-1998 playoffs?
Okay, so I did not, because trick question, there wasn't anyone ejected in those playoffs. So the reason why the language in the articles are saying since 97-98 is because that's when the NBA started tracking like what quarters, when people were what point in games people were ejected. Before that, so we don't have that data. So that's what that was. I was able to find that out. But I did see in ESPN's article about Wemby being ejected last night, it does say that teams are 1-8 when one of their all-stars is ejected before the fourth quarter of a playoff game. And trying to find the list, a little bit tough to find the list, but I did find one that included guys that the 9 guys that were ejected before the fourth quarter of playoff games were guys that weren't all-stars that particular season. For example, Draymond Green in 2022 was ejected from, and 2023 was ejected from games for flagrant 2 fouls before the fourth quarter. That the 2022 season, for example, was the only time that the team went on to win the game. So the Golden State Warriors in 2022 were the only team that were able to overcome an all-star like Draymond Green being ejected before the fourth quarter. So that's Rasheed Wallace should come as no surprise. It happened 3 times in his playoff career.
All right, the Utah Jazz won the lottery in their own way. They didn't win it overall. They took second place, which is better than their odds-on pick would be. The Utah Jazz will be number 2 in the upcoming NBA draft. It is a deep draft. The current projections are rolling things out, saying A.J. Debonsa number 1 to the Washington Wizards, Darren Peterson number 2 to the Utah Jazz, Cam Boozer sometime after that, Caleb Wilson, Kingston Flemings, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm not yet ready to accept the projections because A, that's all they are, and B, there's too much of a soap opera background here for me to just say, oh, yeah, the Utah Jazz are just going to take whoever the best player available is at number 2. There's been a concerted push for A.J. Debonsa to be in the sphere of Ryan Smith, who is the Utah Jazz owner, on some level since high school. Utah Prep, BYU. Now you're tantalizingly close to bringing him into your professional organization as a member of the Utah Jazz. If you can somehow convince the Washington Wizards not to draft him, or more likely you move up and you take him at number 1. I'm listening to any and all cases why that would be too expensive, any and all cases why that's not the right move. The Darren Peterson is the only prospect in the top 3 that there's any kind of real question about. And whether you think it's an attitude problem or a health problem, it's still a problem, potentially, with Darren Peterson. So there's just all of this smoke and fire, and Bill Self didn't understand the problem and was clearly not happy with his player during the season. And I think he got a satisfactory explanation at some point during that Kansas season, because then he started to talk glowingly about Darren Peterson and called him a gym rat and said nobody works harder than this kid does. But he was very clearly frustrated during many of the absences that we saw from Darren Peterson in that Kansas season, and they were hard to explain. Well, the explanation that has come out is hard to accept, but I will defer to the medical professionals out there, 877-353-0700, if you want to weigh in, that, he felt creatine supplementation is what was causing him to cramp. He had too much creatine. He has unnaturally high levels of creatine in his body, and then apparently he was also taking creatine, which caused the problems. Okay? If you take it at face value, it's still hard to understand, because why wouldn't you evaluate nutrition and supplementation as one of the very first things? We had Sarah Todd on the show earlier, and she said, look, it takes a lot of time to figure out when you don't really know what's going on. It takes a lot of time to figure out what's going on with internal medicine, and maybe I should be a little bit more understanding of that. I just have a hard time believing that and maybe I'm just up in the night here. Maybe we are all wrong about our assumptions that it was Ryan Smith who was the driving force behind AJ DeBonsa to BYU and AJ DeBonsa having links to Utah Prep and all that stuff. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe it's like the quiet donors down at BYU that really facilitated that thing. And we should take the explanations when like Jonathan Tavernari, he said, look, it's not Ryan Smith that is pushing BYU basketball the way you think it is. Well, the very reliable sources have told me that Ryan Smith is incredibly hands-on with BYU basketball. One of the most important things that's happened with BYU basketball in recent years is AJ DeBonsa going and playing his college basketball at BYU. Now, I will allow for the possibility that one or both parties in that relationship left the season unsatisfied, that maybe they were like, you know what? AJ didn't drag us to a Final Four like we thought he would. AJ didn't help us overcome the injuries as much as we thought he should. AJ is not the player we thought he would. I don't think that's the sense anyone came away from the BYU season with. It was disappointing because of injuries to other players. It was disappointing because you didn't have the full recipe in order to have a great season. But I think that everyone was happy with what AJ did for BYU. And if you have a relationship with the player, if you think this guy is a good fit for you culturally, if we think that this guy likes the state of Utah and is more likely to re-sign and stay with the Utah Jazz long-term than another potential superstar in this draft, like a Darren Peterson, maybe even like a Cam Boozer, like a Caleb Wilson, to me, that is a reason at least to kick the tires on the possibility of drafting him. But maybe, Darren Peterson plays the position you need. Maybe Darren Peterson is a better fit for you. The soap opera will continue. I have a hard time thinking that what emotional and actual investment that the governing owner of the Utah Jazz has already put into AJ DeBonsa's career is just going to be easy to walk away from when he is right there. Maybe you don't make the trade, but you absolutely have to explore the possibility of a trade, especially when the reports are coming out immediately that Washington will entertain those offers. James made a strong case why it's the wrong reason, or why it's the wrong move to make, why you should just assume that you're going to get a star at 1, 2, or 3, and you take whoever's there, and that's probably going to be Darren Peterson, according to all the projections. AJ DeBonsa, you see the Washington market evaluating AJ DeBonsa's facial expression when he found out that the Washington Wizards were picking number 1. He didn't look overly happy. Does that mean he wants to be in Utah? Does that mean he feels better about being in Utah? I think he's just happy to be the number 1 overall pick. And Washington, D.C. is a pretty cool place. I don't think AJ DeBonsa is only married to the possibility of staying here. I do think it's more likely, though, that the Utah Jazz want him. And the big question is, if you're close to getting him, and if it can be something that you can afford, do you do it just because you love it? Do you buy the car just because, you know what, I've always dreamed of having that car? When I was 16, I put a Porsche poster on my wall and said, someday I'm going to own a Porsche. Someday I'm going to drive that thing. Yeah, there's better cars out there. Yes, I could drive a Corvette instead, and it would be equally fun. But that's the one that's my mind's eye always had that picture in it, and that's what I want. Does that actually play into this at all? I don't know. I don't know if Ryan Smith is going to assert his influence to that level, and I don't know if he is willing to assert his influence to that level if that is what the priority would be for him. Or maybe he loves Darren Peterson even more than he loves AJ DeBonsa, and I'm making these points for no reason at all. The good news is the Utah Jazz are picking number 2, not number 5, not number 6, not number 7, where you could maybe get something that's franchise changing. You're picking at 2. And you're not going to trade back unless you go get Giannis, facetiously, jokingly. You're picking at 2, which means you're supposed to have a franchise-changing talent in that range. One of them is a guy who played his high school and college ball in the state of Utah. One of them is the son of a former All-Star on your team who now works in your front office, Cam Boozer. And the other, the most likely pick, is a guy that a lot of people think might actually be the most talented player in this draft, who probably is a better positional fit, but in my mind has some serious questions about whether or not he is the right player for your franchise. And that, ladies and gentlemen, makes for a very interesting pre-draft process and a very fascinating draft when it happens at the end of June. We'll take one final break. We'll give away a free round of golf. We'll talk to Spence Checketts next on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. If you're looking for a place to watch the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs, just to grab a great bite to eat and maybe a few cold beverages, Big Willie's at 1717 South Main is the perfect spot to do it. Every game, every fight, every golf tournament on the 9 massive big screens they've got in the dining room. The pool hall is rated #1 in Utah. So between periods, between games, at halftime, go shoot some pool. When you go down there, tell them OC sent you. They'll always give you great service. They'll treat you extra special if you say you heard about it on the Sean O'Connell Show at Big Willie's, 1717 South Main. All right, I've got a free round of golf to El Monte, courtesy of the Festival of Tees, powered by the Utah Golf Association and Mountain Home Services. 877-353-0700. We talked about this earlier on the show. We were talking about All-Star Weekend in that 1997-1998 season. Which NBA player won the three-point contest at the 1998 All-Star Weekend? Local connection, hint, hint, wink, wink, 877-353-0700. We wrap up the show brought to you by Advanced Window Products, 801-850-9100. $2,500 off, 10 windows or more. Lifetime warranty on the windows. You need a doggy door, they'll handle that for you. You need window coverings, they'll handle that for you. Most importantly, everything is done in-house, and the lifetime warranty lasts even after you don't own the home anymore. 801-850-9100 as we close things out here on the Sean O'Connell Show. James, is Spence Checketts back in the studio? Is he able to hear me? Can I talk to him today? Maybe. Oh, Spence Checketts, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and it's lovely to hear your voice.
Are you safe and secure in your location?
I am. I'm totally fine. I'm great. I saw a little bit of you on television with our guy Adam Mikulich, but I wanted you to, at the very end of my show here, I wanted you to elucidate your thoughts on the Utah Jazz picking #2 in the upcoming NBA draft.
Yeah, it's massive. It really is. I don't want to say the final piece to a complete puzzle, but the one thing that this roster doesn't have right now, unless you believe Ace Bailey can potentially turn into it, is simply a top 10, 15 player. I mean, most of the preseason rank lists will have Lowry Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. probably around 20, and that's fine. They're really good. And I know everybody points to the Detroit Pistons in 2004 as an example of a team that won a championship without a superstar player, but congrats, you found one example over the course of 70 years. You know, you've got to have a Shea, LeBron in his prime, a Luka. You've got to have a guy like that, a Victor Wembanyama. And I don't know what Washington is going to do. My guess is they just go AJ. I don't think you should overthink it. I think AJ is probably the #1 overall pick. But if you go back and watch Darren Peterson high school and AAU tape, it is insane how impressive he is as a prospect. And a lot of people believe that when this thing is fully baked and these guys are fully developed, Darren's going to be the better player than AJ. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. And I have no idea what the Jazz are going to do. I'm out to some guests for the podcast this week to kind of get a better idea of what they're thinking. But if Washington goes to Bonsa, I just think you go Peterson, and then you may have drafted a guy that in 3 to 4 years is one of the top elite wings in pro basketball. And if that takes place, if that actually transpires, and look, there have been plenty of high-level prospects over the years that were thought to be franchise-changing pieces that never worked out. I mean, this stuff is not easy to do. And there's some stuff about Darren Peter, like it took you 6 months to come up with the creatine excuse, huh? Okay, dude. You know, there's some stuff there that's a little cloudy, but strictly from an athletic profile and the potential, excuse me, of what Darren Peterson could be in 3 to 5 years, I just think you go with whoever Washington doesn't take out of DeBonsa and Peterson, and either of those two guys fit in brilliantly with the way this roster is constructed. So, look, it's a massive deal. I talked about it on Friday. Like, if we are sitting here on Monday and talking about a top 4 pick, then we've got a team next year that's going to be a lot of fun. If they're out of the top 4, then we're still kind of spinning our wheels. So, First time in 46 years they've had a top 2 pick. The last time they did, it was Darrell Griffith, who was an awesome player for a decade. Austin Ainge talked last night about wanting this young player to be in Utah for the long haul, which brings in Cameron Boozer to play because obviously his pop works for the team. So, look, the bottom line is there's nothing bad about this. Danny Ainge, once upon a time, famously traded the number 1 pick to Philly and said, go ahead and take Markelle Fultz, I dare you. We're just going to take Jason Tatum. And Danny's good at this. He's got a track record that shows he'll make the right decision. Obviously, Austin involved as well. So, massive, massive moment, historical moment, and I'm pumped for Jazz basketball next year, a sentence I haven't said in like 5 years.
Is there any irrational, emotional, fairy tale element to this where you've had a vision for AJ DeBonsa, you own the team, and you tell your guys, go make that happen no matter what?
Well, it's a really good question, and that depends on where Washington is at with this because, you know, one of the things that has been floated around is if you think AJ DeBonsa is Kevin Durant 2.0, and you've done your calculation, you've talked to him, you know, off the record, and he's committed to playing here, signing here, and being here long term, then you could do worse than calling up Washington and saying, hey, let's flip. You take 2, I'll take 1. We'll give you Ace. You know, and that's a lot. That's a lot to give up because they like Ace. But if you're Washington, you're holding you're holding the cards. Okay, you got the ace in the hole. The Jazz have to call them. Washington, unless there is some sort of scenario like there was in the Markelle Fultz, Jason Tatum draft, where maybe Washington loves Peterson and they don't want to tell the Jazz. So they're like, yeah, go ahead, give us Ace Bailey in the number 2 pick. You take number 1, and then Washington gets what they want anyway if the Jazz go DeBonsa. So a lot of moving pieces. And I wouldn't be surprised if we hear conversation leading up to June 23rd about the Jazz kicking the tires with Washington because, to your point, and I do believe it to be true, I think they want AJ, and I think AJ wants Utah. If you saw the video last night when it was announced that Washington was the number 1 pick, it looked like somebody went up to AJ and said, hey, your dog just died. Like, he looked so bummed out.
That surprised me, honestly.
Yeah, he looked bummed.
And you don't, it's not wise to, like, overanalyze body language and facial expressions in situations like that. But, I mean, a guy who is projected to be either the number 1 or number 2 overall pick should have a smile on his face, and he didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like, at least it's not Sacramento look, you know. So I'm sure, because these guys are talking behind the scenes all the time. I wouldn't be surprised if Ace, AJ's father, has already started lobbying the Jazz to try to make a play for that number 1 pick. But again, Washington's got to play ball. It's up to them.
Well, I'm sure there will be lots of talk about it, not only today on The Drive, but for the next several weeks on the Sean O'Connell Show and The Drive. Exciting times for professional sports in the state of Utah. Mammoth in a really good spot, and Jazz with this number 2 draft pick and a nice little core of players, I think, finally in a really good spot. So stay tuned for The Drive with Spence Checketts. Thanks for listening to the Sean O'Connell Show. We'll do it again tomorrow. Have a great show, Spence.
Safe travels, bud.